What's the most terrifying thing you saw in the safety of your own home? Somebody tried to break into the house while I was by myself. The whole place was quiet and dark at nighttime. I walked past the front door to go upstairs for bed, and the handle suddenly started jerking around like the Hulk was trying to get in. Then whoever it was started to either kick or shoulder the door, and it was making the whole frame jiggle. I completely froze and my mind went blank. I was just standing there like an idiot and staring. My dog bolted down the stairs like it was her time to shine, scrambled on the tiles, and let loose the most vicious barks I've ever heard. Whoever it was left. She was a very good girl. I miss her. When I was young, I came home from a party in the middle of the night when my dad was out of town. I started making a midnight quesadilla when I heard someone cough in the basement. I yelled and ran outside, and they took off through the backyard. I came to find out my dad's ex-girlfriend's daughter stole her key to our house and came to rob us. She was busted a couple of years later doing this to her sister-in-law. I was just chilling on the couch, doing whatever, when suddenly a really heavy person started sprinting in our attic. Sounded like steel-toed boots and everything. I'm a really small woman, so I immediately freaked out, thinking there was a gigantic man stomping around my home. Then the screaming starts. Literal frickin' screaming. Like something from The Exorcist, and there's multiple voices. I snuck outside and cried, extremely shaken, and called the cops. Guess what's in my attic? Not a big grapey grapist. No, it's raccoons. Also, the raccoons were mating. That's what the screaming was coming from. I went crying to the cops about randy raccoons. I was home for the weekend from uni, but my parents and siblings were away, so I was home alone. Our house is quite a bit secluded, with a church and graveyard next door, and closest neighbors up the street but quite a bit away. I had all of the doors locked, and I was settling down to watch a movie when the doorbell started ringing, so I went to answer it. There was no one there. Then the back doorbell rang, and no one was there again. This keeps happening over and over, and it's pitch black outside. Then whoever it was began banging on the windows and yelling. At this point I'm freaking out, so I begin to call the police and yell at the people outside that I've called them, when it turns out it's a couple of fellas from uni playing a prank on me. I was terrified and reduced to tears at this point, but they thought it was hilarious. They did a few more things like that to me over the 2 to 3 years I was at uni with them, and I always thought of them as friends. I'm older and wiser now to know that they're just C-words. I was home alone one night while my wife and son were visiting my mother-in-law. I walked back to our bedroom to see someone rummaging through my son's room on the video baby monitor. I immediately grabbed my Glock and yelled at the other side of the house, "I'm armed, come out slowly," over and over while slowly making my way to his room. I got there, flipped on the light, and nothing. Searched the whole house, pumped full of adrenaline. Finally satisfied I was alone, I went back to my room and the guy was back in the room. I took a closer look, and I'm ashamed to say I was looking at myself. The camera is a live feed on our Wi-Fi, and it was streaming on a huge delay. I've never known it to do that, and it hasn't done it since. In short, went looking for myself and came back empty-handed. This was written in 2020, and I have to say that I don't know which part of the world you are living in for the internet to be that slow, even during a hurricane or some such. I mean, the presence of the firearm would imply the US, but that connection speed sounds like outback Australia. I was about 21 or 22 and living by myself at the time, and I left my window open on a pleasant night. It was low enough to the ground that you could get in if you really tried, but the screen wasn't easy to take off, and I lived in a fairly safe neighborhood, so I didn't even think twice about it. I woke up in the middle of the night because I smelled smoke, and I reached up to turn on my lamp, and my hand hit what was very obviously a person. My brain fully woke up at that point, and I realized there was a shirtless man in my bedroom smoking a cigarette and staring at me. And I remember yelling for him to get out, and I must have spooked him just as badly as he spooked me, because he leapt out of my window and took off. I slammed it shut and moved a bookcase in front of it, and when I went out the next morning in the daylight, I found the screen sitting against the house. I did not sleep the rest of the night, and I haven't slept with a window more than cracked ever since. I absolutely refuse to live on the ground floor of a building now. I don't know if he was planning to rob me or commit the unspeakable act or both, but it was definitely terrifying and makes me wonder how many times it happened that I didn't wake up for. A few years back, I was home alone during a power storm. I went into the bathroom to take a dump, and at the exact time I was crapping, I sneezed. Well, the power went out at the same time. The house was pitch black, and I literally thought I crapped myself blind. I couldn't see my hands, so in a panic I was yelling, "No, this can't be true! It's impossible!" I was in a panic, feeling for the toilet paper to wipe and flush. After completing that task, I just sat on the loo, trying to figure out how to tell everyone I knew that I'd literally crapped myself blind by sneezing while crapping. After about 2 minutes of complete darkness and dread and panic, lightning struck outside and lit up my hallway. That was the best feeling ever. Not exactly alone, but I was in my home with my newborn son and someone knocked on the front door. I was expecting my mother, but she usually comes in through the garage. I thought it was strange, but I yelled, "Come in," because why wouldn't I? Then this old woman, off her head, comes stumbling through the door and asks me for a ride to the nearest gas station. I told her that I didn't have a car seat for my son, so I couldn't go anywhere, and she just started screaming, "That's just inappropriate," and doesn't stop yelling even when I'm telling her that she needs to leave or I'll call the cops. After a minute or so, my mother actually pulls into the driveway. The smackhead sees the car and bolts out the door. I never see her again. That night, my truck got broken into. I can't say for sure whether it was the same woman, but I gave her description to the cops anyway. When I was 19 in my first apartment, I had someone knock at the door. I looked through the peephole and saw this burly, heavy-set man who abruptly started screaming to let him in. He was screaming things like he was going to beat my butt, kick down the door if I didn't open. I called the cops, and as soon as someone got on the phone, he started body slamming the door to break in. I was freaking out and crying, but luckily 5 cops showed up within 5 minutes. As soon as he heard the sirens, he quickly walked away and they met him at the bottom of the stairs. Apparently, he was a previous renter but was extremely intoxicated. They arrested him and thankfully he never came back. I ended up breaking my lease and moving out 3 months later. It was in a very nice neighborhood, but it quickly made me wish I was back home with my family instead of being on the other side of the United States. My mom had something similar happen to her a year or so ago. She lives in a high-rise and all of the floors look identical in the hall. A drunk man tried to get into her apartment and started yelling and screaming at her to let him in. She called the building security and they came to deal with him. He lived a couple of floors above her. I lit 2 long taper candles for some ambience while I was playing guitar late at night. I was facing the other direction, looking out at the window while playing, and shortly after turned around and went back towards the candles and discovered one of them was completely gone. The stand was still there, but no melted wax, just a bare candle holder, and the other one was still lit and no shorter than it had been when I lit them. It was almost 3 a.m. and I was so terrified that I got in my car and left and drove to my dad's house. When I was like 14, I was home alone one night and around 10 p.m. stood up in my kitchen making some cereal. It was dark outside and then all of a sudden, the loudest sound. Some drunk woman literally launched a hammer through my kitchen window. It was so loud and glass was everywhere. I followed her down the street while calling the cops. It was pretty strange. For those wondering why I'd follow a vandal, she looked like a very fragile old smackhead lady. She could barely walk or see straight and she started stumbling away mumbling some crap once she had done it. Plus I didn't really know how the frick I was going to explain this crap to my parents if I didn't have a solid answer. But yeah, it was a very distressing walk while following her. Definitely an action caused by adrenaline as well. One afternoon, someone knocked at my back door. I thought it was the guy coming to read AmITheA, so I opened the door. Next thing I know, 2 huge guys pushed into the house and one of them threw me up against the wall. Then they shoved me down on the couch. They told me they were Hell's Angels and they were angry because my boyfriend was selling too much, cutting into their profits. They kept calling me by my next-door neighbor's name. We'd suspected they were selling smack before. All of the people passing by that place for less than 5 minutes made it pretty obvious. I just kept telling them I wasn't her. One of them searched the house while the other one kept me pinned to the couch. They started to realize they were in the wrong house because they couldn't find anything where they were told it was. My neighbor's house is a single floor with a basement. My house is a 4-level back split. Then I showed them my mail because it showed my name and they knew they messed up. They started telling me that they were after my neighbor's boyfriend because he committed the unspeakable act on their cousin, which I knew was BS by now, but I didn't care, I just wanted them to leave. They robbed me of my cash and left. I now have locks on my screen door. Huh. Well, although it was bullcrap that you got robbed even though they picked the wrong house, I'd honestly still say you might have gotten off lightly, all things considered. Glad that you were all right. I was asleep while home alone. When I turned over in bed, I casually opened my eyes a little whilst turning, and they were shut again just as quickly. In that split second, I could have sworn I'd seen a man stood at the bottom of my bed. I laid still, awake with my eyes closed, trying to act like I was awake, and listening for any sound in the room for someone breathing or moving. I couldn't hear anything, I was too scared to open my eyes and look, and consoled myself that there wasn't any way someone could have gotten in without me hearing a window smash, and I fell back asleep. When I got up in the morning, the front door was open. They didn't take anything and left no signs of being there. It was still very creepy though. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I've lived on my own a long time and I don't get scared easily. I just finished reading in bed and I turned my lamp off and settled down to go to sleep and hugged my cat up close to me. This would be about 1:30 in the morning. I closed my eyes and I heard a voice saying, meow, like imitating a cat. My window was open though, so I thought it was just someone being weird outside. I opened my eyes and in the middle of my bedroom was a small boy wearing a red jumper waving his arms above his head. I leapt up like a goddamn ninja and put the light on. There was now nothing there. My heart was going mad. Now, nothing paranormal has happened in this house over the entire time I've lived there. I spent the whole night totally freaked out, only getting a bit of sleep when it started to get light again. My friends thought this was hilarious when I told them. I was saying that there's no way I'm living in a haunted house, and I started Googling cleansing, exorcists, and whatnot. The next few nights, other weird stuff started happening. I started sleeping with the TV on, and as soon as I tried to get any sleep, I'd hear freaky voices coming from it, or I'd notice shadows dip by the sides of my bed. It was dreadful. I actually resorted to saying out loud, "I'm really tired, so if you could not haunt me for one night, I'd be really grateful." I'd never believed in any of this sort of stuff before, so it was like an entire paradigm shift for me. Anyway, I was going on about this to my friends at work, and one of them asked if I was on substances. Well, funnily enough, I just started taking this new tablet, Montelukast, for my asthma. When I got home, I read the side effects, and a rare one was hallucinations. I stopped taking them, no more hauntings. In short, medication made me see ghosts. I got a 5-channel sound system. Nothing too fancy, but the best I'd ever had. I watched an action film and heard the creaking door to my left in the distance. I had to clear my home as I thought there was an intruder. Nope, just better stereo sound. I had the police knock one day while I was alone. The cop had a guy in the back of his car who said we were holding his friend captive. I showed the cop my ID and explained it was just me and my husband. He wasn't home, but they could look if they wanted to. The cop said, "No, that's okay," and then asked questions about my neighbors. And that's how you got away with murder. The cleaning lady tried to self-delete in our bathroom. She died 4 days later. My boyfriend worked away from home a lot, and I always struggled to sleep on the first night he was away. On this occasion, I was woken by the sound of a man shouting and then someone banging on wood or a front door. I jumped up and looked out my bedroom window, just in time to see a man dressed all in black walking through our garden toward the house. I ran to the front of the house to look out the front window and made sure he kept going. He did, but he met up with another man dressed in black walking towards my house as well. I was terrified and I called the cops. They arrived in a matter of minutes and checked out the back garden, but the guys were gone. Turned out a neighbor had caught them both trying to steal his car, and one had escaped through the gardens while the other had run through the roads, and they'd met up outside my house. I didn't sleep at all that night, and my brother came to stay the next one. I'm so glad I live in an apartment now. Much more security. I work from home, so I'm home alone a lot. One day I was working, and out of the corner of my eye I noticed some movement in my backyard. There was a man jumping over my fence. Panicked, I call my then boyfriend, now fiancé, and tell him what's happening. While I was on the phone with him, I got a knock at my front door. It's a woman from CenturyLink informing me that technicians will need access to my backyard. I tell her someone just jumped my fence, so I think they're already there. Way to give me a heart attack, CenturyLink. Sleep paralysis. Waking up from a nightmare soaked in sweat with a weight on my chest and completely unable to move. Sometimes I see shadowy shapes or feel there's someone watching. I get auditory hallucinations when I'm tired that's brought on by my anxiety. The one that caused the worst anxiety attack I'd had in months was just as I was drifting off to sleep, a guy yelled, "Hey!" right in my ear, and I launched myself out of the bed before realizing what had happened. You know those tongs in the kitchen that have a spring but a latch to keep them together? I had a pair of those and I put the latch on and put them down on the counter. I went away for a bit and came back and they jumped off the counter at me. Biggest jump scare of my life. The latch had come undone and they sprung open. But in the millisecond when inanimate objects suddenly come to life and jump at you, you don't realize this and totally freak out. The narrator has a stainless steel kitchen unit that pops violently between slightly convex and concave when he puts hot pots on it. And let me tell you, going from peacefully cooking to having the bejesus scared out of you when there's a bang and all of your kitchen implements hop off the unit is pretty damn scary. I was living alone after my ex-husband moved out, and the creepy guy across the street, who was 20 years my senior and enjoyed a variety of substances, kept trying to date me. He would not leave me alone when I left my house or arrived home, and he'd threatened to commit the unspeakable act on me. I just started dating my current boyfriend, and he helped hang up motion-detecting lights outside. I started carrying pepper spray and leaving the alarm on whenever I was home. My boyfriend and I also agreed that if I didn't text him for a certain period of time and he couldn't get a hold of me, that he'd go to my house and check up on things. I also CC'd him on my work calendar just in case. It got so scary that my boyfriend actually moved in a lot sooner than we'd planned because I felt so unsafe. After the creepy guy watched my boyfriend move in and saw him pottering around with project cars in the driveway, he stopped and moved away a few months later. I've never felt so unsafe in my own home, wondering if our outside lights had turned on because of the neighbor's cat or because creepy guy was trying to break in. One night I was watching The Conjuring at home with my little sister when we heard someone putting a key in our front door and opening it. We were sitting in the living room next to a sliding door that was very close to the front door, so we both heard it very clearly. Now, this didn't alarm us since we knew our dad had recently gone out to get some stuff, so we just assumed he'd returned. "Dad, you're back already?" I casually asked. There was no response. "Dad?" I asked again, thinking that he hadn't heard me the first time. Again, silence. At this point, I got the feeling that something wasn't quite right, and I could tell by the look on my sister's face that she was quite nervous as well. I'll note that up to this point, she'd spent the entire evening rolling her eyes at horror movie cliches, and she very rarely gets scared. We looked at each other for a moment, wondering what we should do before we started hearing a few more scattering sounds from right outside the sliding door. I was frozen in fear by this stage. I tried one more time in a louder but shakier voice. "Dad? Is that you? Please respond, was repeating in my head, but the silence continued. Now, at this point I was freaking out and literally jumped off the couch. My sister also abruptly got up and started walking towards the other end of the room, which led to the kitchen area. She later revealed to me that she was planning on grabbing a knife. She had this horrified look on her face that I hadn't seen before. We looked at each other in nervous silence. I didn't really know what to do, and I didn't want to make any further sounds. I finally decided to walk up to the sliding door and begin opening it as slowly as possible, peering into the darkness. And I know, I literally became the idiot who investigates the unknown, creepy noise without anything to protect myself. When the door was finally open wide enough, I poked my head out and scanned the corridor, preparing for the worst. To my surprise, there was no one there. But what was more strange was that the front door was still completely shut. We never heard the door close. My sister and I were obviously both extremely relieved, as we were almost certain that there was an intruder in the house. After this, I immediately went to go ask my mum, who was situated in her bedroom at the other end of the house, if it was her or whether she had noticed anything. She told me she thought my dad had come home as well, as she also heard someone opening the front door. Around half an hour later, which felt like an eternity at the time, as we were still quite shaken from the incident, my dad finally arrived home and confirmed that he hadn't come back earlier. To this day, my sister and I still have no idea what happened that night. One day while I was working afternoons a couple of years back, I woke up around 10 a.m. and started to watch American Dad before getting up. Next thing you know, I hear my back door open, a normal thing in our home since we only use the back door. But nobody was supposed to be home yet. I assumed it was my mum and didn't think anything of it. Then I heard the footprints coming up the stairs as my bedroom was on the second floor. I called out to my mum and got no response. Then my door cracked open and a head popped in. It was a 30-year-old man with a blonde beard and a big mane of greasy hair who looks so shocked to see me. At the time, I was about 260 pounds, 6'3" and 20 years old. I was also sitting in only my boxers. Before I was able to realize what was happening, he asked, "Is this the Paulson residence?" To which I reply, "No?" He makes a swift exit, and before I can recollect my thoughts, he's not even in my driveway. I talked to a family friend who's a veteran cop. Turns out this man has been pulling this kind of stunt to rob people in nearby towns. A few years ago, I was home alone in my basement playing video games when I hear the door that connects my kitchen to the garage creak open and slam shut, but I never heard the actual mechanical garage door open. Then I heard heavy footsteps of someone wearing boots walk the length of my kitchen directly above me. I originally thought, my brother must have forgot something, as he had left about 5 minutes before that for work. So I was about to yell up to him to make fun of him, but something in the back of my mind was telling me, hold on, something's not quite right here. So I muted my TV to hear better and stay quiet. Then I heard the footsteps turn around and walk back to the door, and again I hear it creak open and slam shut. But again, I never heard the actual mechanical garage door open or close. So I walk slowly upstairs, thinking maybe my brother just forgot to close the garage door. I slowly open the door to my garage and see that the garage door has been closed the entire time. The only two explanations I can come up with are either something paranormal happened, or someone broke into my house, walked through my kitchen, and left without taking anything, whilst also not letting me hear them open my garage door. In my opinion, both are equally terrifying to me.
What was your I'm in danger moment? So I was walking to my school, and there's this little street with 2 lanes that leads onto the highway that you need to pass to get to my school. I usually wait till everyone has passed since no one respects the yield, but that day, the guy in the right lane actually yielded, which was awesome. So I made my way across. Suddenly, as I passed through the right lane and entered the left lane, before my mind could process anything, my body just straight up stopped moving. I was briefly confused before I felt 2 cars barely graze both my front and backside. Apparently, the guy on the right started driving again as soon as I was out of his lane, and at the same time, a guy behind him was being impatient and jumped to the left lane without stopping for me. So they both passed me at the same time, while I survived by being frozen in the minor gap between the two. Honestly, my subconscious is the only reason I'm alive today. Something very similar happened to me in high school. I was walking home from school down a very busy street. I was approaching an intersection, but I stopped a few feet from the edge and just froze behind the light pole. At that moment, a car runs a red light, hits the back of a car, and sends it spinning towards me. Car also clipped a motorcycle, sending it flying 40 feet in the air. The car ends up 1 foot away from the light pole. I'm behind, stopping in the area I'd usually wait to cross the street. If I hadn't just stopped, I'd be pretty badly hurt. I was in a bouncy castle at a college ball, and my friend turned the pump off as a prank. My head was sealed in the deflating plastic, and I was suffocating, kicking my legs wildly, trying to free myself. I had almost passed out when someone noticed and pulled me out. It would have been quite an monogamous end. Oh yeah, because that's a good prank. Wee! What does this do? Chicka, 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 psst. Roger, would you seriously turn off the pump to a bouncy castle with people inside? Of course not. Only when it's funny. Come on! It's only a prank. When I was about 14, I chucked a teen angst tantrum and went for an angry walk in the bushland behind my house. Didn't take my phone, didn't tell anyone where I was going, just stormed out. It started raining pretty heavily after about 45 minutes, so I turned back to head home. But a bridge I had crossed had been washed away and the creek was rising very rapidly. I stupidly skidded down the embankment to see if I could cross, but didn't realize the rain had made it too slippery for me to be able to climb back up. I vividly remember standing on that little patch of rock thinking, haha, I might die. I didn't. I climbed onto a rock ledge, waited out the storm, and managed to make my way back up the embankment and return by a different route. By that point, had been gone for about 4 hours and had escaped death only to be almost killed by my parents. My intoxicated friend knocked over another guy's pint by accident, and then his drunken brain decided he could take on the guy. The guy was built like a brick crap house, and his friends were all huge. They were the type of guys that didn't take too kindly to being challenged to a fight. We were 2 skinny 19-year-olds. Anyway, I bought brick crap house guy a replacement drink, and somehow talked him and his mates down from flattening the pair of us, then dragged my idiot friend out of the pub and got him home. Some people should moderate their drinking. By the way, the rule is you spill another man's pint, you immediately apologize and buy the next round. Actually, saw the guy again a few days later, small town, and he was cool about it. Private pilot story. Just on a return flight with a few mates back to Loco Aerodrome, I looked down at rudder pedals and noticed the side of my shoe was basically starting to melt. First moment of realization that the engine was indeed on fire. Ha! I'm in danger. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. We are coming up here on the beautiful sights of Washington. You can actually see the Space Needle if you take a look out to the left. Just don't look to the right because there's smoke coming from the engine and my foot is on fire. Please enjoy your stay and thank you very much for flying with Western Airlines.
A retired cop my dad knows has a great story. I guess this was like the 70s or 80s. A pregnant woman spent the night at her mother's house while her husband was at a bachelor party. She comes home in the morning and sees the door is ajar, but she knows she locked it. She runs to the neighbors and calls the police. She calls the house where the guys were supposed to be, but no one answers because it's like 7 a.m. after a novel of hard drinking. My dad's friend and another officer shows up. They talk to the wife and decide to check the house out just in case. Since she was pregnant, she's going to wait at the neighbor's house. So they walk in and shout, "This is the police! If anyone is there, come out now!" Or something like that. Then they start checking rooms. Nothing in the living room, nothing in the hall. But then they get to the kitchen. There is broken glass on the floor and what they think must be blood. So they call for backup and they keep looking. Nothing in the other bedroom, nothing in the washroom, bathroom. Finally, they get to the master bedroom and see clothes on the bed. And they can hear someone in the master bathroom. "This is the police! Come out now!" they shout. And nothing. Finally, they decide to go in full force. They open the door and run in, weapons hot. They see a man completely in his birthday suit, blood all over himself and the bathroom, passed out on the floor. The medicine cabinet is open and everything that was in it was on the floor in the sink. The guy in the birthday suit wrapped his foot in a towel and there was blood coming from it. Though they couldn't get him to talk, as he was unconscious, they called in for an ambulance. A few minutes later, the backup guys and the ambulance arrives and they start treating the guy. Then my dad's friend goes to tell the pregnant woman about the intoxicated guy in his birthday suit that broke into her house. She was horrified. Because he was passed out and had lost the blood, the medics take him to the hospital. The pregnant woman and the neighbors are all looking out the window as they wheel the guy out, covered in a blanket, handcuffed to the stretcher. She just loses it, is laughing and crying, potentially hysterics from being pregnant. By this time, one of the other cops was inside and he starts trying to calm her down. He's afraid she is going to go into premature labor. Finally, the neighbor explained that the guy they had arrested was the pregnant lady's husband. It turned out his buddies dropped him off about half an hour before his wife got home. He stripped down for a shower, then decided to get some water, shattered a glass, then stepped on it, then wrapped his foot in the dish towel and crawled to the bathroom where he tried to disinfect it, but instead spilled everything, got blood everywhere, and passed out. That must have been a hell of a bachelor party. A couple of days ago, I was working up a tree, arborist. The tree in question was a black locust that was dying at the top. However, the base looked fine. I set about slowly dismantling the tree, which was an awkward task because I couldn't get as high up onto the tree as I wanted due to the decay, and it was growing over a building, so I couldn't just let the bits free fall. After an hour or so of working, I heard a snap about a meter above me while I was about 13 meters up into the crown. I looked up to see a long branch above me that was growing into the crown of another tree had snapped. I realized instantly that this meant that the base of the tree I was in had failed, and I was going to go down with it if I didn't get out. Before I could even react, the tree was free-falling down towards the outbuilding that I had been working so hard to avoid. Time slowed down, and I could see my colleagues standing in the woodland watching me with pure fear on their faces. After that, it's hard to put thoughts into words, but I remember looking down at where the tree was going to land and thinking that it's weird because this second I am completely lucid, but a second from not I will be probably unconscious, possibly never to regain consciousness. Yet I didn't feel any panic, just a knowing that I'm in extreme danger. All I could do was grab the nearest branch and plant my feet on another one and hope to God that I didn't end up under any part of the tree. After what seemed like forever, the tree came down onto the roof of the outbuilding. I had probably traveled 10 meters vertically and about the same laterally. The large limbs of the tree that were previously to my right, but were now above me, didn't snap and crush me like I was sure they would. I managed to hold onto my branch and stayed roughly in the middle of the tree. I was free from injury, other than a twisted ankle and a twinge in my wrist from holding on tight as the tree smashed down. I don't know how I didn't get seriously screwed up by that tree, and I don't know why it failed on me, but I will never forget that knowing that I'm in danger, falling with tons of wood, and there was nothing I could do about it. My third year fighting forest fires, I was upgraded to pump truck operator for a mop-up crew. After a section of the fire was deemed extinguished, they send in mop-up to make sure it's actually really out. I drove a giant pickup truck with a huge tank of soapy water and filled up portable water bags for the mop-up fighters. On my way back to base, I had a bit of water left when I saw plumes of white smoke. You're urged to extinguish all smoke because no one wants a dead fire to come back to life. There's a fallen tree next to a bunch of bushes, and another half-fallen tree, and the half-fallen tree is spewing hot coals every couple seconds with a loud pop. Each pop of hot coals makes the other wood products take off. The fire was at risk of starting over again right here. I had nothing but a small ant bladder bag. I bounded down to the pump truck, grabbed a hose, ran it up, bounded down, turned the hose on, ran up, and began attacking the situation. As I'm chasing down the heat and fuel source, I realize I'm surrounded by flammable objects. Soon after, I'm surrounded by giant flames, alone. I was literally screaming and laughing as I hacked and sprayed away at the rising flames. I got it tamed down after soaking and chopping, killed the main source. I also sprayed the heck out of the branches so soapy water was dripping everywhere. I had just finished rolling the hose back up and was catching my breath when these Marines came running up the hill. They were sent to investigate the smoky mess I've been dealing with. Being high-fived by a Marine is a good feeling. I know you guys might hear this a lot in general, where people say like, hey, appreciate your firefighters, but seriously, appreciate the people doing this. Fighting fires is absolutely no joke. Incredibly grateful. It's something I know I personally could never do. When I was about 12, a friend from our local church drove me and his sons to go swimming at a creek near where we lived. I didn't know how to swim yet, but he assured me that I'd be fine since there wasn't much water and it could be a good learning experience. So far, pretty normal stuff. It gets weird though. The water was much deeper than expected and he did nothing to help on several occasions when I almost drowned. I was supposed to stay at his house overnight, but wasn't feeling very good after breathing in water a few times. Plus, something obviously didn't feel right. He was mumbling to himself while he put his shoes back on after swimming. Good thing I stayed home. Turns out he was off his medication. My family didn't know that he had previously terminated a person during a hunting trip when he was in his early teens. The night I decided to go home, he went off the rails. He believed that the world was going to end, so he tried to terminate his whole family. When my family went to church that Sunday, we didn't see his family. The pastor told us what happened. They had all miraculously survived, but he was now in lockup for his serious issues. Almost drowned, almost taken out. Family friend was a murderer, and we didn't know it. Going home from a party in a shared Uber with some friends, I mistook the street for another one and ended up further away from my apartment than I thought. I put the GPS on, and of course it makes you take some back alley. At one, I saw some movement near a car, and there was a guy looking at me. I pass him, try to call my friend because he was looking weird. By the way, I did the wrong number and someone got a voicemail from me sounding totally terrified and spitting nonsense. I walk faster and look back. He is ducking behind another car and clearly switched from his original place, and he had a small knife in his hand. I bolted from there and ran as fast as possible with adrenaline and stopped after finding a busy street. But when I saw the knife, I definitely went, oh crap. I was on holiday and had left my hotel to walk to Livingstone National Park in Zimbabwe. My friends had visited earlier in the day and wanted to stay by the pool, so I figured I'd walk over by myself, since it wasn't a particularly long trip. The easiest route for my hotel was following a small path between some bushes and trees. I'd been down the path before, but this time, there were families of baboons walking down this path and no other person. I walked on anyway, figuring that as long as I wasn't waving food around or getting too close, I'd be fine. Apparently, I must have done the latter and unintentionally stepped too close to one of their young, because one of the full-grown adult baboons jumped out in front of me and started howling at me, baring its teeth. Because of the noise it was making, it attracted the attention of all the other baboons, and 2 other full-grown adults soon joined the first in howling and showing serious aggression, all of a couple of yards in front of me and to my side. I had no idea if there were more behind me, but my instinct in the situation was to hold up my hands to show empty palms, stand tall, broad, and start stepping backwards and away slowly. Thankfully, it worked, and they eventually turned away and carried on, but for a short while, my mind was having flashes of being torn apart by 3 baboons. I later found out their bites can break human bones, so I'm pretty lucky that my instinct in the situation was the correct one. I arrived for work at a bank, stepped inside, and had a stranger say, "Happy April Fools," and put a revolver against my temple. 2 robbers, both with revolvers and rifles, had made their way inside before opening, and had bailed up the manager as he arrived and then the staff as they arrived. They were talking to a third accomplice on walkie-talkies. I was told to lie face down on the ground, arms on my back and legs together. One robber was going down the line, hog-tying staff with cable ties, while the other had a manager and supervisors unlocking safes. All along, there were threats not to look or move, or you would be shot. The robber had just tied my wrists together with the pistol lying on the ground between my legs when I heard a commotion. A staff member had managed to exit while they were distracted. The robbers followed him and left the bank quickly. They got nothing. All in all, I was there with 15 other staff for about 35 minutes. They were caught further down the track. These were career bank robbers who pulled off a number of robberies over a period of time before being caught. It was really like a movie, dressed in suits, dark glasses, gloves, black spray paint over the cameras. You open the time lock safe, you get ready to open safe deposit boxes, you do the night safe. They certainly had a plan. 6 months later, the same branch was hit by another group. I had since moved to another city, but that robbery, according to my colleagues who were in both, was way more terrifying. I was living with a man I'd known for a month. New York City be like that, and one day I left without saying anything to him. I was at McDonald's and he texted and asked if I was at Papa John's, which was across from McDonald's. Thought, oh, creepy. Then I got home and we had a conversation where he started talking about something I just texted my girlfriend about, and it was a topic we had never discussed before. Red flag. I'm in danger. All the times he seemed to be in the right place at the right time, had food for me when I hadn't eaten, hit me all at once. Found out, dude had spyware on my phone and was watching my every move. So 100% agree, this is extremely creepy and no one should be doing this. But with a weird, cute, twisted idea, what if, ironically, he actually just was really caring, but he had no idea how to properly give that kind of care? Hey, buddy, you had a good workout? I bet you did. That was some really good Pilates in there. I brought you some water and this really delicious Big Mac for that nice protein. You need your protein, Big Mac?
Yeah, thanks, buddy, but I didn't tell you I was going to go for a workout.
Oh, I know. I'm your Papa Bird, watching you wherever you go. Gotta have a Big Mac for a big man. I love you. When I was 18 years old, I was living in my first apartment by myself. I had no roommates, and my parents had just moved. My downstairs neighbors were a group of 20-somethings who had lots of traffic. Constantly people coming and going, parties multiple times per week. Rarely saw the same people twice. One day, I noticed a blacked-out vehicle in one of the parking lots. I swear I saw a camera with a long lens through the heavily tinted windows, but I just kind of brushed it off. Maybe it's paranoia. Over the next 3 days, I see more and more surveillance. Vans, sedans, trucks,
all of them mirror black and limo tint windows. They would sit there for 8 or so hours at a time, and another vehicle would rotate in and relieve the post. Then, quick as they came, they disappeared one day. Now I'm getting concerned. I have no idea what is going on, but someone is definitely watching my apartment building. 2 weeks after I saw the last surveillance vehicle, I go out on my balcony for a smoke. That's when I see the cops. Holy crap. So many freaking cops. They were stacked up, breaching style on the sides of the building adjacent to me. There were probably 24 uniformed officers. Suddenly they fan out, weapons drawn and hot, and aimed at my building. They take defensive positions and are yelling at each other. One of them motions at me aggressively to go inside. Then a file of 12 SWAT officers begin closing in on my building, walking right up the path. I'm crapping my pants now because I've got a half an ounce of herbs and alcohol in my house, and there's 40 cops outside. I go inside and hide everything as best I can and go to the window that faces outside so I can watch this crazy crap go down. The neighbors below me got raided. The SWAT team fired a launcher of some sort through their windows. I heard 5 loud pops followed by acrid smoke wafting through my vents. They forcefully entered the apartment and I heard so freaking many shots. One small caliber pop followed by a roar of larger weapons. Must have been 100 rounds. I threw myself on the floor of my apartment as I listened to the supersonic crack of rounds missing. It seemed to never stop. I guess the neighbors were major players in the illegal substance game, and one of them pulled their piece during the raid, so the SWAT team terminated all 3 of them. The apartment building was condemned, and I had to move back in with my parents. After the fact, I realized how lucky I was to not get shot on my balcony or struck by a stray round in my home. Sometimes I have flashbacks and nightmares to that moment. My face on the uncomfortably thick carpet, blue-gray smoke in the apartment, glass shattering, dry wall cracking, rounds flying.
What's the biggest plot twist you've seen in real life? In primary school, we had a World War I memorial lesson, and we were asked if anyone had any relatives who fought at the time. My friend brought in a picture of his great-great-grandfather with his wife. A girl also brought in a picture of her great-great-grandfather with his wife. The teacher said they looked similar. She put them side by side and looked shocked. We gathered around and it was the same man who had kept his 2 wives a secret. Both had been married privately. My classmates were cousins and didn't know. Dude, a similar thing happened to me. I was going to school with a female classmate for years, and one year my family had a big reunion and she showed up. Turns out we were cousins and we actually started hanging out more at school. Met a dude at a local 24-hour fitness who was wearing a Shark Punch shirt. Since most people have no freaking clue about the band, I immediately decided I needed to talk to bro out with this dude about his particular taste in music, which was metal. We got to talking, find out he's a drummer, lives locally and wants to start jamming some evil stuff. We exchanged numbers and all that good stuff. Of course, however, actually meeting up with reliable musicians is something harder than it sounds, despite the enthusiasm. Around the same time, I was working security at a local bar, and I met this random cute girl who wasn't from the area, but was totally into me and wanted to hang out. We exchanged numbers and we started planning a meetup. When we finally did, we hit it off pretty well, but she had mentioned that she's still kind of dating around, but really liked me and hoped that I was okay with that. I was totally okay with that because I was doing the same thing. We hung out maybe another time or so, and then shortly after that she hit me with the "sorry, but I'm kinda dating this other guy for serious" line, and I said I totally understood and moved on. When Jim Guy and I finally managed to get together to jam, a friend of his was there to play bass with us. We got introduced, started talking about random stuff, when Jim Guy happened to mention to his buddy about this girl he was dating. He and I started sharing our similarities and preferences of people we've dated, and I asked him to see what she looked like. He's like, "Sorry dude, she doesn't have any social media or anything like that, but I have a video of her at some restaurant we went to a few weeks back." He shows me the video. "Ah man, she's cute. Yeah, I met her outside at some bar in LA. Dude, she really reminds me of this girl I was dating not too long ago. What's her name?" "Kim." "Wait, really? That's so weird. I was dating a girl named Kim too. What are the odds? Hold up. Does she have a Snapchat?" "Yeah, why?" At this moment, I started trying to find her on Snap. "Dude, what's her name on there?" My gym buddy's friend at this time starts looking at both of us. "Oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. Kimbersleys." The friend starts dying of laughter at this point, And we both come to the realization that we are the same dudes she ended up leaving/staying with. But we still ended up jamming anyways. This was basically that episode of Friends where Joey and Ross date the same girl. Maybe this isn't that big, but here it goes. I'm a medic, and one morning we had a call for an older woman, in her 70s if I remember right. She was having cardiac issues, was in compensated shock from a very low heart rate. From the time we got to her home to the time we were in the ambulance, she had been getting worse. We paced her heart and she was doing good the rest of our whole ride to the hospital. About 16 hours later, we get called for a rollover car accident. Get there and we have one male in the vehicle, unresponsive. Vehicle is upside down off the road. We get him out and he's in very bad shape. He wasn't breathing, so we intubated him and off to the hospital we went. Almost at the hospital, which is 30 miles away, and he goes into traumatic cardiac arrest. He's dead when we get there. While we were on the way to the hospital, we found his wallet, since we didn't know who he was. We saw a badge and he was a retired police officer, and I remember from the morning our patient's husband was a retired police officer. He was on his way to see his wife. Unfortunately, he stopped by the bar first. While it wasn't my job, I went to the nurse to talk to the wife and let her know what happened. She thanked me for being there so much for her family that day. I had a similar experience to this one. We had an old couple in different wards in our hospital. I was treating the wife on my geriatric station. On one of my weekly night shifts, I responded to a CPR alarm to reanimate the husband. It didn't go successfully. I personally took my patient to see her husband for one last time. It was one of the most emotionally draining days of my residency. I have a coworker who we'll call Joe. Great guy who has an equally great wife. Over the years, and even prior to meeting Joe, multiple doctors told Nina she would be unable to get pregnant on her own due to problems with her ovaries and fallopian tubes. She and Joe decided that a child-free life was okay with them. So she and Joe got married and lived happily for 12 years. When they started out, they didn't have much, but as time passed, they progressed in their careers and made a nice living for themselves. Finally, they got to the point where they were comfortable enough to buy a sports car for themselves, something Joe always wanted to do. It was his first new off-the-lot car that he ever owned. Now, Joe and Nina were in their early 40s at the time and figured that they would just coast on into retirement. Well, about 6 months after they bought their brand new car, winter came. Nina got a case of the flu and just couldn't seem to shake it. She just felt run down and nauseous, just not herself. After about 3 weeks of this, she went to the doctor. The doctor asked if there was any possibility she could be pregnant. She laughed at him and said, "I've been married for 12 years now and haven't had so much as a scare of being pregnant. Multiple doctors said it's not going to happen for me, so there's no way." But her doctor said, "Humor me. Let me rule it out. Just do a urine test." Well, wanting to figure out what was actually wrong with her ASAP, Nina peed on the stick and you guessed it, pregnant. So in their 40s with 12 years of living, just the two of them, they were expecting. After the initial shock wore off, they were actually pretty excited even though they had to sell the new sports car, since a two-seater wasn't really going to be working for them. A few months later, their son John came into the world the usual way, happy and a healthy baby. And still are today. John just finished his first year of high school, great kid and super smart too. You just never know what life's gonna throw at you. My sister's boyfriend decided he wanted to do more with his architecture skills, so he gave a 2 weeks notice and moved to Haiti to help rebuild after the earthquake. They stayed together. He would send her long emails with photos and stories of what they were doing. This went on for a couple of months. One offhanded tip from a coworker, and a week of digging later, it turns out that he never went to Haiti. He moved to Seattle to be with his fiancée and partner of 9 years. This same thing happened to the mother of my friend growing up. She was dating a guy for a few years and things were getting pretty serious. Then one day he goes on holiday to visit his parents in Argentina. She goes to meet him at the airport when he's due to come home and there's no sign of him for hours. So she calls him and he says he's contracted a serious illness in Argentina and he isn't well enough to fly back, and basically says that he doesn't have long to live. She panics and phones him every day to see how he is. He starts avoiding her calls, and after about a week of not responding, she thinks it's the worst and contacts the police, who trace his credit card use to London, where he lives. They find an address that it's linked to, and then she starts doing some digging. So she goes to the address only to find his wife and infant daughter, while he's away on a supposed business trip. They both bonded over what a complete a-hole he is, and both decided that they were better off without him and dramatically left him when he got back from his business trip. Pretty sure these two women are still friends. It's crazy that there are some people out there that can't even land partners in this world, but there are others that have like 5 secret families. The Matrix is really throwing around the stats in the create a player mode. It's 1991, I'm 19 and just signed the lease on my first solo apartment. I just got the first paycheck from my new job. I deposit that paycheck at the ATM. Another first, I'd always gone into the bank to do this. 2 weeks later, I get my bank statement in the mail and see with horror, I have only $1.87 in my account. Way wrong, I should have at least $200. I've been very careful with my spending. I'm freaked that I came within $2 of bouncing my first rent check. I'm literally reaching for the phone to call the bank when the phone rings. It's the police, asking if my ATM card was stolen. I check my wallet and the card is missing. My job at the theater pub came with cash tips, so I didn't use the card often. And I tell them that I was going to call them anyways because I was missing $200 from my account. Well, we've got your card and your $200, so just come down to the police station. That's what they tell me. I can't figure out how they have my card and the cash. It doesn't make sense. So I just drive down there. The detective says someone, let's call him Bob, pulled in to use the ATM and saw a man acting suspicious while he was using it, moving back and forth as if he was trying to dodge the cameras. Bob says that the man then left the ATM, got into a car and drove away at high speeds as if he was fleeing. Bob then went to the ATM and put his card in, which popped out. Bob then withdrew $200 and another ATM card popped out. My card. Bob's card had popped out because the crook had left my card in the ATM before speeding away. Bob then realized that he had withdrawn money from my account and not his, so he brought my card and the cash to the police station and reported the attempted theft. The detectives give me the description of the crook. According to Bob, it was a man 5'7", brown hair and rounded gold-rimmed glasses. I say out loud, so about my height, my color hair, and glasses like mine? Before realizing Bob was describing me. I've never deposited a check in an ATM before, so I was moving back and forth, following the instructions on the screen, filling out the envelope with my account number, punching the amount in, etc. I then forgot to take my card out and just left because I'm a freaking idiot. I drove away at high speeds because I was 19 and that's just how I drive. Worried the detective might be annoyed, I didn't tell him that I was the crook. I just thanked him and left with the money I stole from myself. Somewhere in a box in my closet, I still have the police report where I was both the victim and the perp. I'm curious about how the guy who returned everything to the police was able to withdraw the money. Wouldn't you need the same PIN number? Or did the OP just leave without closing out his account? Crazy stuff. I told this in another thread, but it's still hilarious to me. Guy I knew in my high school English class was talking about one winter day how he was late to school because someone hit his mailbox. His parents made him fix it up before he went to school. He missed his ride and had to walk instead, but the school staff was cool about it and they didn't punish him. A few minutes later, another girl came into the class and she was talking about how her morning sucked. She lost control going down a hill and hit someone's mailbox. She freaked out and drove off before anyone noticed and described a few details of the house. Mailbox guy puts 2 and 2 together and burst out, "You hit my mailbox!" He wasn't super mad about it and she turned beet red. It was hilarious how they both reacted at the time. We lived in Florida at the time, and my dad goes to the eye doctor because he's seeing double. In all other aspects, he's healthy. He explains his symptoms to the doctor. This was in the early 2000s. The doctor picks up a medical book on eye problems. He finds the kind of symptoms my dad is describing. The doctor shows him the book. In the book, there is a whole medical page explaining what he is experiencing and a picture of a kid from the 1960s. My dad looks at the picture and says, "Doc, that's me!" The doc says, "Yes, those are the symptoms you are showing." My dad says, "No, that's really me in the picture." It turns out my dad had this eye problem when he was a kid. It's so rare that they took his picture in Ohio in the 1960s and slapped him in a book of rare eye problems. He doesn't remember much about taking the picture, but he did manage to get a copy and take it home for himself. I dated a girl who lived in a city I had recently moved away from. On my birthday, I drove out there so we could be together and go out to dinner. The entire time we were at dinner, she was distant and constantly checking her phone / sending texts, etc. There was virtually no conversation, and her constant texting was uncharacteristic and started to give me the vibe that she was either cheating on me or was just not into the relationship anymore. When we finished eating, she asked if it was okay for me to stop by a mutual friend's house to pick up some substances. I reluctantly agreed, thinking it was a pretty selfish request considering it was my birthday, and I don't even do that stuff. As we were walking up the steps to my friend's apartment, I'm running through the different ways for me to break off this relationship until the door opens and I realize she had planned a big surprise party with a ton of my friends, many which she didn't even know. All of the texts and lack of attention that I had been attributing to the lack of interest in me turned out to be the exact opposite. She's actually a pretty beautiful person. I've totally been here before. Well, kind of. I totally understand the overthinking people's actions, but I've never had a surprise party before. Was on a flight from Paris to Boston. I had the aisle seat across from a little hall of bathrooms in the middle of the plane. At one point, a man from a few rows up goes into a bathroom and after a couple of minutes comes out and is just standing in the aisle. So it gets my attention. He keeps going in and coming back out looking up towards where he was sitting. I see a woman sitting next to his empty seat shake her head at him, but he doesn't give up. Finally, after 5 times of coming in and out, he finally gets the woman to come back there. The lights are out and most of the plane is sleeping. They start making out in the bathroom hallway before he goes into one and pulls her in with him. They are in there for quite a while and then he comes out and goes back to his seat and a few minutes later she comes out and does the same. They are really flirty in their seats and about an hour later repeat this. The man goes in and she joins him. They end up doing this 3 times throughout the flight. My husband, who is sitting next to me, has caught on to what they are doing as well, and we make a joke about how they must be newlyweds on their honeymoon. We get off the plane and the woman is standing there at her gate waiting and the man is nowhere in sight. As the people from the back of the plane get off, a completely different man goes up to her and gives her a kiss on the lips and asks her if she was able to get any sleep on the flight and he calls her dear. They then walk off to the luggage area with their arms around each other. So apparently what we thought was this adventurous newlywed couple was actually a woman hooking up with her seatmate while her husband was sitting in the back of the plane. Maybe it's a thing they do, maybe they were swingers. I really hope so because that's rank otherwise. My only thought while listening to this story was how did they get away with it 3 times? I worked for a bank at their call center as a workforce admin. We had a supervisor with a higher than normal personal rotation. People would be doing okay, then suddenly their numbers would drop and quit. In one of those instances, the guy quitting made a big freaking scene, called him out, insulted him, and pushed him around and ended up being restrained by other coworkers. At the HR meeting, supervisor is going off on this guy, bringing up every single thing the guy did wrong. He was boasting a bit too about how he would fix all of this dude's mistakes. The entire time this guy sat silent, said nothing, just stared at whomever asked him something. When the HR rep asked if he had anything to add, he pulled out a tape recorder and just played recording after recording. Of what, you ask? Of the supervisor literally threatening this guy, harassing him, belittling him, and overall being a complete jerk. Apparently, this guy would target overperforming agents and make their working environment hell to protect his position. I'm told the supervisor simply stared at his feet and nodded when he was told he was fired. The agent, as I understand it, was also let go, but he was very well compensated. For a semester in high school, my English teacher set up this game where one student was a secret killer. Every couple of days, the killer would sneak a note into a classmate's locker, backpack, textbook, or whatever that says, "You've been killed." My best friend and I were trying harder than anyone else in the class to play detective on this, especially near the end of the semester. Near the end of the school year, there was still 6 students left alive. They took the last 6 students who were alive and brought them into the front of the class one at a time, so we could all debate if he or she was the killer or not, and the person could plead their case. The teacher brings up my friend and says, "Okay, tell us what happened." And my friend just starts explaining on how he had to be really sneaky on this. So there was a good 20 seconds where I just didn't understand what he was talking about. There wasn't any great reveal or drum roll. He just brought him in front of the class and started explaining how he killed everybody. I lost my mind pretty good. The other twist that I forgot to mention was that at week 2 or 3, he had went to a student that we didn't really talk too much and told him that he was the killer and that he needed him to kill John Deere 89. So he hands him a few of the notes, and from there on out, he had one guy on the inside helping him kill people. That's why he could kill so many people without being caught, because if someone got killed, I was with my friend so I could vouch for him. The teacher said that there was nothing in the rule book that said you couldn't get another person to help you kill people. It was a huge gamble because the other kid could have just said, "I caught the killer," and the game would have been over. I forgot to mention, if you guess who the killer is, nothing happens. You have to catch them in the act. So when there was only a few people left, everyone is yelling, "You're the killer! You're the killer!" and just pointing fingers back and forth. This teacher sounds awesome. I wish there was more teachers like this because I had a teacher in high school that had us read Fight Club, and I thought that was so wild. I was always excited to go to his class. I graduated law and got engaged to a girl I had been with through university. We both applied to the same graduate program and ended up working in the same office in Canberra. 3 months before our wedding, I found out that she was cheating on me with a mutual boss, and I broke it off with her. Long story short, it got really ugly, and the two of us ended up in a very bitter court case over property. Canberra is a pretty small city, and the legal world is pretty bloody small there too. And everywhere I went, I bumped into my ex. It was beginning to seriously get me down. Her too, as it transpired. And I applied for an Australian government overseas development job in Tuvalu, a Pacific island with about 11,000 population. It's quite a prestigious job to get, with only 2 positions offered for a 2-year contract on a rotating basis. I was successful in the application and moved on island to start my posting, only to discover that my ex was the other successful applicant. I spent the next 2 years sharing a tiny office on a tiny island with the person that I quite honestly loathe more than anyone in the world. Wait, you left in 2006. I was the guy who replaced you on that program. Your story was told to me at the bar at the Funatui about 100 times in the first month that I was there. I can't believe that I'm now seeing this on Reddit. Holy freaking crap. Yep, that was me. I hid out in the Funatui Lagoon Hotel for about 5 nights a week. Small world. Dude, I can only imagine how it must feel to want to get away from somebody, get the opportunity to do so, and then end up trapped with them for 2 years. Was at a big art show with my wife and kid. They were 3 or 4 at the time. We were walking up to a doorway and I noticed a couple of huge unclothed statues. I mean, like, no big deal to me, but I was worried about what the kid was going to say because he's a bit of a loudmouth at the best of times. But I didn't need him yelling about private parts in the middle of a crowded art gallery. I realized that the worst thing to do would be to make any kind of scene about it. No covering eyes or anything, just subtly angling the stroller away from the statues and making big deals about the art things on the opposite side of the aisle. Then the inevitable happens. I remember it happening in slow motion. My kid's head turns towards the unclothed statues. Eyes widen, arm raises and finger points, and mouth slowly opens. Dad, look at those statues! They're not wearing socks!
People who have been on dead people's computers. Did you find anything you wish you hadn't?
Good friend of mine had a major stroke and went into a coma. Prognosis was not good and the family made plans. Since I was the one that knew about computers, they asked me to go through his stuff and find pictures for his memorial service. 2 laptops and 10 USB sticks later, I wanted to bleach out my eyes. My friend was a great guy, but he was morbidly obese. Apparently had been renting out escorts and such from online forums. They were far from pretty, and thankfully, my friend only appeared in a few pictures, but had his clothes on. Out of about 10 gigabytes worth of images, I was able to find 5 suitable for his memorial service. The toughest part was telling his family that I could only salvage 5 photos. I told them the hard drives were corrupted. Yep, I wiped them. No sense in letting them know what I found. On a positive note, I did adopt his parrot, and till this day, she keeps calling me by his name.
I'm disappointed we did not get a name for the parrot, and I would also be pretty traumatized if I discovered my friend's USB stick full of all of his finagling with ladies of the night. Turns out my brother was writing a novel and a ton of poetry. I always wonder if we should do something with it. I'm not sure how completed it all is, but my cousin who went through it said it was quite a bit of material. I'll seriously look into doing something with this now. I'm not sure if I'll be back in the US until this late summer, but I'll see if my cousin can upload the files somewhere next time she's at my parents' house. There are also piles and piles of notebooks and journals. Again, I'm assuming are his poetry and short story collections. He told me that's what he was writing in the notebooks. Those would take a while to go through since it is all handwritten. At any rate, he was a bit of a recluse for about 8 years prior to his death. He also had some severe substance abuse problems and an anxiety disorder. So the content/background for his work might be interesting if it gives insight on what was going on during that time. My mom said something that he was looking for a publisher at one point, so it is probably what he would have wanted for some of his works. I have no idea what the brother was writing, obviously, but I think that it's a very nice gesture in a way to honor a dead family member, to find a way to publish that work to some degree, and maybe even that work could go on to inspire someone else in the future in a positive way. A few months after my wife passed away, suddenly, I finally got around to cleaning out her PC and laptop. I'd barely gotten started when I came across a file that had its file associations removed. She did all the financial stuff, so I had to find out if it was something important. Of course, my first try was Word document, and sure enough, it loaded. Yeah, it wasn't financial. Turns out she'd written a list of lifetime goals that she wanted to reach, and it had been updated only weeks before she passed. A list of about 30 things she'd dream of doing, and only about 4 or 5 were crossed off. I didn't get much done after that. So I tried to find the file again per people's request, but I was not able to locate the file. I'm not sure what I did with it. Drank away most of my memory of that time, to be honest. But off the top of my head, I remember some of the more mundane things on the list. She wanted to buy a house, travel the world, start her own YouTube channel. I remember the most recent update was that she'd crossed off wanting to meet Alton Brown, which she did at a book signing just a short while before it happened. I remember she made sure to bring her nutmeg with her in case he asked. That would probably make me profoundly sad if I found that, but I would also hold the hope that they felt the same way as the dead wife from Up did, the whole "you were my adventure." Also, I have no idea who Alton Brown is, but apparently there's some kind of American TV host chef personality.
Not on the computer, but my family found a 3-ring binder my grandmother kept. It was full of lusty love letters. We asked one of her best friends about it, and she replied with, "Oh yeah, I was supposed to burn that." Apparently my grandma and this guy had a relationship where they never actually got together, but had a lot of frisky phone conversations. None of that is quite so bad, I guess, unless you start imagining that it was your grandma. She described many details of their talks in her letters and referred to it all as her year of passion.
God damn, Grandma. Good for you, though, girl. You do you, man. Just, damn. My father died a few years ago from colon cancer. Even though I was only 19, my brother was significantly younger when we lost him. He was 7. My father and brother would watch a movie usually every other night. And a few months ago, I finally got around to cleaning his computer. I looked through his folder where he downloaded movies to, and the last film he downloaded was Spirited Away. And it was the night before he passed away. Needless to say, we watched it together that night. Good film, definitely fits this story and the whole, theme of death we got going on in this subject, but I'm more of a Porco Rosso guy when it comes down to Studio Ghibli films. That one is my absolute favorite. TLDR, dead brother's computer, possible self-deletion. Wish that I hadn't found that he had already erased his computer history. When I was 18, I took my older brother's computer after he died in a car crash. He was the sort of guy that people loved to be around, always laughing, joking. He made people feel good about themselves. His car had run into a grouping of those cement Jersey barriers on a road under construction. No other cars were involved and there were no signs that he had hit the brakes. He must have dozed off. While emptying his room in his house, we found a set of crumpled papers. They were the unfinished first sentences of self-deletion notes. But he never left a completed note, and instead chose to throw these drafts away. Maybe he sat down to write a note, decided he didn't want to die, needed some air, went for a drive, got into an accident. I couldn't understand how this happy, great guy that I loved could be so unhappy. So I searched his computer for any clues. I was prepared to look in every corner for a clue, an internet history, an AIM log. This was back in the day. A photo, an email, anything. There was nothing. Not just nothing strange, nothing at all. He had already wiped his computer clean, probably anticipating that his little brother would inherit his computer and snoop around. It still doesn't confirm or deny anything for me. I feel certain that he intended to go through with it, but I've never been more upset to find absolutely nothing. Man, I completely understand why that would be, conflicting in a way, man.
TLDR, priceless memories, creepy smut. Oh good, this story. So my uncle took buttloads of pictures just all the damn time. We didn't actually realize the scale of this until I had to look through them all after he died. Turns out we could have lost every single picture of me, my sister, my cousins, and still we'd have a remarkably smooth transition from infant to adult in picture form. That said, we also discovered he liked smut. So much smut. And since we didn't want to accidentally throw away some priceless picture, I had to go through 3 hard drives and a couple hundred USBs and CDs of almost entirely smut.
Now I was more impressed with his capacity to find and organize things than anything else. 4 gigabytes of name time-stamped videos and pictures of trans women with freakishly large breast implants urinating on men. We have the USB for that right this way. I'm just gonna say, they said themselves that this uncle who died was a very organized individual. I'm sure they would have separated that stuff from those things. And honestly, it's like, at a certain point, morbid curiosity is all the excuse you need. It's like, if I found that, I'd be like, okay, how deep does this rabbit hole go? But hey, I ain't judging.
That's a goddamn lie. I'm judging everything.
My boss passed away in his sleep just over a year ago. He was young and it was unexpected. I helped his boss get into his computer at work and also his laptop from home to retrieve insurance, banking, investments, etc. information for my boss's family. It was very eerie in that I found my boss had a lot of the same tastes in music, TV shows, movies, etc. that I had. Visited the same websites, etc. I felt like he and I could have become much better friends if there'd been more time. I ended up getting almost everything for them. There are a couple of Excel files with financials that were password protected. I ran some brute force programs against them for a few weeks, but eventually my boss had me shut it down and then it was over. And so now I sit at his desk on his computer using his mouse and his keyboard and do his job. I like to think he's out there somewhere, watching over me, and that he'd be happy with what I've done in the last year. I hope so at any rate. This one is a little odd because either he already respected the crap out of his boss and then found out about their common interests, but it seems more like, in the way that they wrote it, like I said, there's a lot of context probably missing from this, so don't take me as like, a hard truth or anything. But it seems like upon finding out that they had a lot more in common than they realized, he formed a parasocial relationship with a dead man. 9 years ago, not a personal computer, but my local library has a set of computers in there and people can get usernames and passwords and use the virtual desktops, given they have a library card. This old guy would use the computers a lot. I wasn't nosy, so I never looked in depth, but he was using a word processor, so I assumed he was typing letters or something similar. Anyway, I volunteered there over the summer and I had to close out inactive library cards, or ones that had paid dues. Basically, this meant I was deleting accounts by logging onto their virtual desktop and cleaning them out. The old man showed up in the lineup. Turns out he died a few months before. I opened up his desktop and went to documents because curiosity got the better of me and I wanted to see if he had anything some relatives wanted or something. There was his life, encompassed in 2 folders. Folder 1, novel. He was writing a memoir of his tales in World War II. Folder 2, Missy Missy. From what I could collect, was his wife. In it were dozens, if not over 100 documents of love poems and letters to her. I backed them up on a USB and intended to return them to his wife. I'm sure she would want the love letters. As it were, the wife was dead and he was buried next to her in the cemetery. I was sad, because these were letters to his long-dead wife. She had died in 2004. I gave the files to his son, who read them out loud at the old man's annual memorial mass as a eulogy and testimony to the love of his wife. Well, it might have made you sad, but it made me happy, because guess what? The greatest thing you can have is a love that transcends the bounds of life and death.
My girlfriend and I used to play Pokemon a lot. I still do, actually. But she passed away in a car accident a year ago. One day I opened up one of her games because I was feeling down and I noticed her main player was named after me and all her Pokemon were nicknames after pet names we gave each other. The thing is, I did the same thing in my game, but we never told each other.
Short and sweet, I love it, but it vaguely, ever so vaguely reminds me of the Animal Crossing comic about the dead mother. Absolutely melts my frickin' heart. God, look it up if you don't know what I'm talking about. No, but I got an old computer from church once. They upgraded and donated it to us. It was filled with horse smut. I don't go to that church anymore.
I say, may the Lord have mercy on the horse smut-loving heathen that resided in that there church.
Well, I sometimes help out at a charity that ensures ladies of the night have access to condoms and can reach out to police if they suffer violence, etc.
At one point, we threw a fundraiser that sold art created by a former or occasional lady of the night and showcased the art of one deceased woman in particular, who I believe was about to begin transitioning to a man. I was given her hard drive through a friend of the family that worked at the organization and asked to retrieve what I could of her art and her life. My memory is a little fuzzy on most of this, but I think her death happened in the early 2000s. She had a fairly large Napster directory, and I think it was a Windows XP machine. To be honest, I don't think I found anything I wish I hadn't. Instead, I found a trove of beautiful art and a small window into someone's life. She was both a hobbyist and a professional photographer who had a webcam she made good use of. I saw her travels to India and South America. I saw friends of all shapes and sizes, mainly muscular and heavy tattooed, and action shots of her and her girlfriend. She had an active social life, and in most ways, she was just like the rest of us. I feel odd typing it, but I would have felt very voyeuristic if she were still alive. As it were, I didn't worry much about it, and instead thought of it as a very serious responsibility. I guess ultimately, I found a reminder that even people who do work that's derided or considered dehumanizing by some still lead normal and wonderful lives just like the rest of us, with the same struggles and joys and trials and tribulations. I'm glad I got to experience it.
Why did I give you such a doofy voice? Whatever, this next one's kind of depressing. TLDR, found my grandfather's writing on how much he hated my grandmother. When my grandfather passed away, we were going through his computer to save off important things. We mostly saved off genealogy information, but found one very strange item. My grandfather had written a book/thesis on how much he hated my grandmother. It was about 150 pages long, had a table of contents and all sorts of hate-filled stories and anecdotes. My dad shared it with one of his brothers, and they waited about 5 years before showing it to my grandmother. I'm still not 100% certain that she ever needed to know about that book. One of my family members printed it out and mailed it to all of my aunts and uncles. My dad is one of 7. It was a huge drama fest for years. It seemed to have died down lately, though. 150 pages. A table of contents entirely dedicated to your hatred for presumably your wife. My God, the hatred in this man's heart is unfathomable. It is so strangely cruel and yet oddly sensible at the same time. I mean, he didn't murder her or anything. And plus the question is, was she bad? Was she so bad that it was warranted that he wrote this book? Just my God, this strange and yet beautiful world we live in. What the hell? Made a throwaway for this. This is my first time posting on Reddit. I had to get this off my chest. I knew my father had a vibrant internet life. He had been in IRC for a long time, maybe starting in like 1996. He had been a regular on the one channel for about 10 years. I think he was a mod or whatever the equivalent was. He talked about his online friends a lot. They seemed like great people and they were supportive when he got sick. After he died, I wanted to make sure they knew, but I wasn't sure how to get in touch with them. About 6 months after he died, I got a Facebook message. The sender said they were looking for a woman with my same last name who lived in my town. She was a regular in their chat and had cancer, and they were worried about her. Approximately my father's age with the same kind of dog. The dog picture he sent was not my father's dog, but it looked similar in a photo of my father's very distinctive truck. After being in some shock, I realized that my father was doing some serious catfishing. He had posed as this woman for over a decade. Honestly, she sounded nicer than my father in a lot of ways. He sometimes had a major temper and could be a total butthole. This group of people really loved this woman in their community. I didn't know what to tell this guy. I wanted to tell the truth, they deserved closure, but if I lied and said she died, it would raise questions. Why was there no obituary, etc.? I did not want them to feel betrayed either. After thinking for a few days, I told him. He seemed really confused, but honestly not terribly upset. He said that he was sorry for my loss and hoped I would visit the chat sometime. We would keep the secret between us and he would tell the group that she died, but not the whole truth. I think this was the best way to handle it, but sometimes I regret it. I don't know what my dad would have wanted. Strange yet beautiful world we live in. Seriously, kids, be careful who you talk to online. You have no idea who you're talking to at any point on the internet. It could be anyone with any intention. They could just be messing with you for an entire decade for no other reason than just because they can. I don't know. I am honestly just shocked that this person, the online chat friend of the father, took it as well as they did. I would have to go away for like 10 minutes and process and then reply maybe.
Yeah, my uncle's laptop. We powered one up and there were all these weird selfies taken from overhead with him lying on his back. He was a gargantuan old shut-in / hoarder, so they looked really weird. And then there were all these hardcore twink smut videos and stills. This was odd because he had always been straight to my knowledge and kind of a homophobe. Yeah, I know, it should have been a red flag. And then it hit me. He was taking selfies to put himself in the picture, so to speak. Decades too late to be a twink. He was an old man trying to imagine he was young, beautiful, and able to explore something he couldn't have done in 1950s Texas. Before he died, he had become fixated on a couple of memories of friends coming on to him in swimming pools, etc. I now understand that he was fantasizing about missed opportunities to have fun. There was also an account for some kind of meetup site for guys. All old guys. I had to email the site and tell them this man is dead. We don't have a charger for the other laptop. I don't know what we'll find on it.
Utterly traumatizing. I don't know why I dedicated myself to such a stressful voice there. I was kind of trying to go for like the old lady, the wrinkly like stick of an old lady in the chocolate episode of SpongeBob, I guess. Anyway, I would be exceedingly careful about opening that second laptop. You might get Raiders of the Lost Ark if you open it.
Several years ago, a distant relative died and left their computer password protected. My grandma gave the computer to me and said that if I could pull everything off the hard drive and give it to his wife, he had a lot of finances and other important stuff on there, I could keep the computer. So I set to work, ended up just writing a script to brute force it since I had tried every combination of birthdays, pets, etc. I could think of, and my script found the correct password after 3 days. I find what one would normally expect. Finances, a ton of family pictures, assorted documents for work, some fairly tame erotica. Now you might be thinking that's what disturbed me. The fairly tame erotica. No, actually. What disturbed me was that I found in a subfolder of a folder on his desktop labeled 2001 resume. In that folder was about 11 gigabytes of lolicon smut. Keep in mind this was like 2008, so that's quite a bit. I searched the rest of the computer and found no trace of real CP, so I just ignored it since lolly is more or less legal. Didn't see any reason to drop this on the rest of the family, so I omitted it from the copy I made for them. Kept a few DVDs of the stuff though in case it ever came out that he had graped minus the G a kid or something and nuked the drive. Considering I was like 11 during all of this, holy crap, that was a shock to see.
I'm aware I said earlier that, yeah, I would look at stuff out of morbid curiosity if I was there, but as a rule, I would generally rather not be the go-to guy to go through a dead relative or anyone who's dead's old laptop files and stuff. I just don't want to be in that situation. Also, what was up with the 11-year-old genius?
A relative of mine, 40M, told me this story. His roommate in university was a very quiet person. Several years ago, his roommate got into an accident. He lost pretty much 10 years of memory. One day, my cousin found a USB belonging to his roommate in his bag. He phoned said roommate's parents. The parents decided to come and pick up the USB. My cousin, not being able to resist temptation, looked through the files. He found plans for a self-deletion note, a journal about the roommate's depression, and draft of a very sorrowful please come back letter to said roommate's former girlfriend. My cousin, looking at the joyous, blissful, loving post-memory loss picture of roommate, straight up formatted the USB. My cousin told me that he believed that his roommate would be better off without these memories.
Now that is a juicy goddamn story. Now I gotta say, I've always been kind of like, is long-term amnesia really a thing? I'm sure it is, but it's one of those things where because I haven't experienced it personally, there's just a degree of skepticism I have towards the whole concept where it's like, really? The memories are just gone? It's not like they're in little glass containers that shatter and then the memory dissipates into the air and up into the goddamn stratosphere and it's gone forever. It's somewhere in your noggin, you just can't freaking remember it. I don't know, it's a weird thing. It's so hard to explain because I don't freaking have it. Hopefully you understand what I mean though, in terms of the skepticism of it. If someone told me they had amnesia, my immediate conclusion would be they're screwing with me. This was such a weird, funny topic to do. I mean, all the people's actions, I have to question some of their reasonings for keeping some stuff and looking at things and whatnot, but what a funny one to do.
What's your best "fire me, I freaking dare you" moment from work? Worked for a newspaper, editing and actually putting the paper together, arranging it all, placing stories and pictures where they need to be, titling, quoting, and sourcing everything. I was a one-man team and used an overly complicated system that I figured out how to use really effectively. They treated me like garbage, set impossible deadlines, and berated me for not meeting them. One day, the boss tells me to fully complete a paper by the end of the day. Gave me no warning, I had no articles from the journalists and no photos from photographers. It was my job to collect it all from everyone, and he wants me to do it in a single day? I told him no. If he wants it done, he has to give me more time. He tells me if I don't have it done by the end of the day, I'm fired. I tell him that this paper can't function without me. He tells me I need to take the day off and cool my temper, and that he'll do my job for me. I get a call an hour after I get home, and that he needs me to come in and do it, and I can have as much time as I need. Promptly quit on that rumphole. Forget your stinky newspaper. Worked a job where I was the only one who knew how to take apart, clean, fix, and put all the equipment back together and do the weekly and monthly maintenance. I had a boss tell me one day that I was doing a poor job and not doing enough and that anyone could do it. If I didn't step up, I would be fired, or else they had manuals for each piece of equipment. So that night, I took apart all the equipment, weekly and monthly stuff too, cleaned them, and then just left it apart for them to figure out that morning. Then I turned my phone off after getting home for the entire day, as I had the day off. When I turned it back on the next day, I saw that I had initially received angry texts ordering me to return and put everything back together. This lasted an hour. Then text saying I risked being fired, then text begging me to return, then more text trying to compromise with OT, then an apology, before nothing else for the rest of the day. Other than that, the head boss wanted to see me as soon as I came in the next day. Came in the next day, and over half the stuff was still not put together, and what had been put together was put together haphazardly, and would need to be taken out again, then put back in correctly. Was immediately asked to be seen by my boss and their boss to explain myself the moment I was seen entering. Once in the office, I told them that if they weren't there to apologize, then just fire me, or drop it and let me put the stuff back together. They looked at each other and then told me that I could get back to work. Boss never called me lazy again. That's so crazy to me. So legitimately this guy, your boss, was like, I can't believe it. You're just so lazy because no one else here knows how to put these machines back together. Why are you so lazy? As the kids say it, that's cap. When I was 17, I worked a summer holiday job at Pizza Hut. I had transferred to my hometown restaurant from my university town restaurant. I was there for 5 weeks and hadn't been paid yet. The jerkhead boss claimed it was because I gave him the wrong employee number. I hadn't. Anyway, after 5 weeks of no pay, I rang him on New Year's Eve, i.e. busiest night of the summer, and said I wasn't coming to work because I wasn't a volunteer and I wasn't going to work for free. He told me if I didn't go to work, I may as well not come back as I would be fired. I didn't go to work, and I had a fun New Year's instead. Then a few days later, I called the employment tribunal, I'm in New Zealand, and told them what had happened. They called my jerkhead boss, He then called me, offered me my job back, and was nice as a pie for the rest of the summer. I worked at an unspecified telecom a few years ago. I was a senior manager in charge of programming, third-level support, and production support. A business unit bullied through code changes, made by the business side through a side deal with a legacy programmer in the data center, circumventing my team, QA and production testing. That just had to get implemented immediately without going through any testing at all. I refused. The CIO overruled me. 72 hours later, phone activations had ground to a halt. Customers nationwide were screaming, and the CIO called phone conference after phone conference, demanding timelines for when I was going to get this crap fixed. He kept screaming to have members of my team to get on the phone and explain themselves to him. I refused. Finally, I snapped and told him that if he wanted me to fix his mistake, I would need to get off the freaking phone, go work with my teams, and the only reason they hadn't walked out yet was that I was keeping him off their bums. But we would all happily go together. 24 hours later, QA and my team had the cow crap cleaned up and fixed for a clean rollout. This was all to avoid a 24-hour delay for QA production testing. I wish I could say that was the only worst time. Husband was having his gallbladder taken out and was having complications before surgery. I needed to leave from work for about 2 hours, and my boss threw a fit, stating I couldn't leave. I told her I had 300 hours of sick time I can use for myself and my husband, and if she wanted to push, I'd take all of it at once, leaving no one but her to do my job. She said she'd fire me if I tried. I just looked at her and said, I have to go. I'll send you my doctor's note. I wasn't fired. I was actually awarded that year for job performance. I didn't take all 300 hours. I just threatened to since I was protected by FMLA. I only took the day off. I don't know if anyone else got that vibe when she said, I have to go, I'll send you my doctor's note. It was such a CSI moment, just, I have to go, I'll send you my doctor's note. Anyway, you tell them. You tell that boss. Yeah! Over the first year I worked there, I essentially took over most of the tasks in my department, which were previously held by other departments and was done badly because of it. This led to a massive increase in productivity. I then found out I was paid significantly less than what others were making and others in my position across the industry were making. So I go to my boss and tell them I had done all this work, increasing productivity, and I would like to discuss a raise. They said no. Okay. So I worked there for another year, asking for a raise every now and again, until I was offered a job that paid double. It didn't start for a couple months, so I held on to that job until I was set to submit my 2 weeks. I asked for a raise again, thinking, what the hell, why not? My boss goes off, tells me I won't get a raise, and says some very colorful things about it. It culminated with her telling me, if you don't like your pay, maybe we should evaluate your future at this company. To which I replied, already have. I took another job and this was your last chance to offer me what I deserve. I quit and walked out of that office. Friends told me that my sudden departure caused a massive backup of work that ended with my manager being fired for it. Ah, c'est la vie. Do I love stories like that? Ah, that lady. What a jerk. Worked for Radio Shack and always butted heads with the district manager. He wanted me to use these ridiculous sales techniques that might work in a big city, but were really pushy. The year he became our DM, I won a contest for best salesman in the whole company out of about 14,000 employees, and I did it without being pushy and forcing stuff on people. He still tried to get me to use these ridiculous techniques each month when he would visit, but after I won the contest, I stopped sugarcoating it and would flat out tell him, that's stupid. I'm not going to do it that way. I was a summer teacher at one of those Korean SAT prep schools that hired U.S. college students for a summer, and then promptly worked them to death. Although I will admit, the pay was pretty good. We taught 8:30 a.m. through 5:30 p.m. with an hour lunch, but had homework to grade every evening, prep work, etc. Well, they were mainly focused on teaching English, but I was a math and physics major, so they had me teaching SAT math and college prep physics. No problem. Then they decided since I studied physics, I should also teach their chemistry class. I tried to tell them that I didn't know much chemistry, but they insisted. So I worked my backside off refreshing myself on all the stuff before I taught it, while still teaching another math and physics class. One day in the middle of this, I got legitimately sick. I called in the night before, per the rules, and told them I couldn't come in. I took one day off, sleeping in my apartment, and then dragged myself in the next day. When I show up, they pull me aside and say, "So how do you plan on making up the time for the classes you've missed?" Excuse me? "Well, we didn't have anyone to teach your classes, so all the kids are behind now. You have to make up the time. We figured you could just extend your morning class an hour for the first week, aka teach over lunch, and your afternoon class could then start an hour early for the next week. Why didn't you have a sub teach my class?" Then they messed up and said, "We don't have a sub." Well then no, I'm not going to skip my lunch because of your guys' poor planning. "We'll fire you, and then you won't get your plane ticket reimbursed," they replied. Go ahead. First, I followed the rules and gave you notice I was going to be out. Second, you just told me you don't have a sub for my classes. That means if I leave, you're going to lose all those students that I'm teaching. That will cost you a lot more than the plane ticket will cost me. This was about 5 to 6 years ago. I was the second in charge of our shipping department, making $11 an hour. The head of shipping had a mental breakdown, so I took over while he got help. About 3 weeks after he returned, the company released him because they didn't like him and I could do the job. When they told me they had released him, I asked if there was going to be interviews for the job, or was the job just mine since I was number 2. I was told they were looking, but I would have a chance to interview once that process started. Fast forward about 6 months, and I'm still doing this job that pays around $50,000 a year for $11 an hour. We had some issues with staff turnover and process changes because the warehouse manager thought he knew best and would listen. They then tell me that there wouldn't be a shipping manager, just a shipping lead, which would be an hourly position. I ask about a raise and get told my review is in 2 months, so just wait. I wait. 3 months. 4 months. Then one day, after a 14-hour night shift, I get a call from the WM telling me I have to come in right now. When I get there, he unloads on me for things that were beyond my control and mistakes other people made. We start yelling, and that's when I told him, "I make $11 an hour doing this job ex-boss told me he got paid $50K a year to do. I don't need this crap. Give me a raise or I won't be back." I then went home and back to sleep. When I go back to work, I'm met by WM and Ops Manager. They appreciate the hard work I've been doing and are putting me on a salary starting at $45K since ex-boss was there longer. I negotiated up to $48K. I was working in a restaurant. Already knew I was sick, but our managers were rumpholes, and I knew if I called in, they'd be extremely upset. Showed up to work around 8, and by 9 a.m. I knew I wasn't going to last for the rest of the day. Managers still made me stay. Around 9:30, I was pre-bussing my tables, and just the sight of half-eaten food pushed me over the edge. I managed not to get sick and hold it until I got to the dishwashing area, but then upchucked in a trash can immediately after putting my plates down. A coworker saw me and vouched for me when I went to tell my manager I was leaving for the doctor. He said, "Even with the doctor's note, if you leave work today, you'll be fired." I said, "You have human waste in a kitchen trash can and haven't even done anything about it. It's on camera. I'm leaving." Showed up for work a few days later and didn't hear anything about it. Ended up quitting a few weeks later for a job at a couple considerably higher scale restaurants. I worked in a deli several years ago while I was a university student, and one time I caught bronchitis and a wicked eye infection at the same time. I tried calling a few people to see if we could trade shifts for the week. Nobody answered their phone, to no one's surprise, so I called my boss instead and told her what was going on. She replied back saying my health is not her concern and that if I'm not showing up, I need to find someone to cover. Just so I understand, I have an infection on top of having bronchitis. I am on antibiotics and can barely function properly, and you expect me to come in and operate slicing machinery because nobody wants to take my shift. Trying to articulate this without coughing was difficult, but I managed it. Correct. My body decided that now was the perfect time to have a coughing fit, which my boss heard through the phone, and that prompted her to say, you know what? Maybe you should stay home this week. I hated that place. It's not like we were ever understaffed. If anything, we were always overstaffed. But freak me if I tried trading shifts with someone else for health reasons. I've had to cancel appointments because of this crap. I got out a few months after the bronchitis incident. I was elbows deep in an AT&T Unix machine that should have been replaced a decade before, parts strewn all over a desk when the client came in to see what was taking me so long. You've got 3 dead fans, one of the power supplies has failed, there's a bad CMOS battery, and the video card is glitchy and refusing to allow the machine to post sometimes. So how long is that going to take? 15 minutes? I could patch things up in a couple of hours, but I'm going to have to come back in a few days with new parts. If you can't fix it in the next half hour, you're fired. I'll find someone that knows what they're doing. I stood up, grabbed my tools, and started walking. Where are you going? I told you how long it would take. That's longer than a half hour, so I guess I'm fired. My firing lasted about 3 more steps towards the door. 2004. Worked at a municipality department. One day the programmers update the work PCs and block pretty much everything and anything. No internet at all. No authorization for installing anything. All games removed from Windows. They even removed the calculator function for some reason. Then the supervisors started moving coworkers around and my entire team was dispersed across a gigantic building for no reason. We were the top team in terms of results. The supervisors simply hated our guts for some reason. So me and one of my coworkers tried to devise some way to have communication without having to travel for 5 minutes each time, across the building and down a floor, just to get to each other's desk and ask a simple yes or no question. We do this during our lunch break. Our supervisor interrupts and asks what we're doing. We explain we're trying to save time and maximize communication and results. The supervisor, who doesn't like us anyway, says we should get back to work and quit trying to communicate through unauthorized means. Okay, we simply stopped trying to install Messenger on our phones. One day later, the supervisor is looking for my coworker. I don't know where he is. I say so. Well, then contact him through your Messenger program. The one you told us to quit installing? Yes. We gave up on that. On your orders. She tried to get me fired for refusing to obey basic orders. I explained the situation to her superior. He let me get back to work and told me to ignore her from then on. I moved to a better post a few months later because she made my life unbearable from that day on, and I finally went and told the upper floor they'll either move me elsewhere or I quit. As I was studying in Paris, I also worked night shifts in a hotel near the Hôtel de Ville district. I worked from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. several nights in a row. The hotel was very busy as it was a very touristic area, so getting 4 hours of sleep over the total 4 to 5 nights was usual. It happened several times a week that the hotel manager simply forgot to relieve me in the morning, so I'd be falling asleep on the counter as they came 2 or 3 hours late. When I politely remarked that I'm tired and they're late again, he'd simply laugh it off and say, I guess we forgot about you. Finally, I decided to pass a job interview for some other work that essentially happened during the day, so I'd finally sleep my nights. When I found out that they accepted me in that new job, I waited until my shift should have started that Friday evening and phoned that manager waiting for me to relieve him at the desk. Oh, hello, I just called to say that I got a new job from next Monday, so I'm not coming tonight, nor ever. What do you... But you cannot! Why didn't you say something sooner? I guess I forgot about you. I used to work at a small family-owned grocery store for a few years. We got our load in on Mondays and Thursdays, and we got passed over one Monday, and the distributor said we'd get the missing load in on Thursday. So what essentially happened was a double load, and my 2 receiving partners were out sick. I was the only person in the warehouse receiving at the time and got to take on 15 plus pallets of groceries that needed to hit the shelves immediately. I was specifically told to not go up front and to do what I could while the front end crew covered the aisles and cash registers. Well, a lot of them were either lazy, untrained, or just putting in their hours so they could pay bills. I put in my earbud, just one, and get to work. I'm halfway through checking the pallets when I get called up front, so I ignore it and continue. Then I get called in again, so I head up there and get yelled at by a new hire with a bad attitude to do your job and bag for me. The customer was a regular, and we got along very well, and she told me that she was fine and could bag her own groceries. Between the customer and the fact that I wasn't having it, I walked away. I had 3 years and 2 ranks on her, so I didn't give half a crap and went back to my pallets. Then I get the newest hotshot manager who replaced the old hotshot manager who replaced the beloved manager who trained basically the whole store, in my face about having an earbud in on the clock, which is allowed as long as you have one ear free, and said I could be sent home and not come back if I wanted to listen to music. So I gestured to the pallets and said, go for it. These all need to be checked in and broken down. Have fun. I got to keep my earbud in, so I had that going for me, which was nice.
What is something that happened at a sleepover which you'll never forget? My friend got an inappropriate text from his mom that was meant for her boyfriend. It specifically said the boyfriend's name in it, so I'm certain it wasn't anything weird. The look on his face and the graphic detail in the text was the funniest freaking thing I've ever witnessed. I couldn't fall asleep because I was laughing for hours. It's always fun to get those types of texts from people, but never when it's your mom. I feel bad for this person. We were all around 8 to 10 years old, and it's about 11 p.m. after spending all day with the birthday boy's aunt, his legal guardian. We were watching Wild Wild West when out of nowhere, one of the boys says to my friend's aunt, "You have great knockers." She said thank you, and we all continued watching the movie. That kid went on to be a Giga Chad. First time I ever saw spicy content was at a sleepover, and it totally blew my mind. I had no idea that there was a whole world of spicy possibilities beyond awkwardly touching my pillow. Hey now, the anime body pillow business is booming. This may have happened to a friend of mine. I was the first one in the group to get a computer in our bedrooms. I became, an expert in surfing the internet. Well, one night, Chris came over and I showed him LimeWire. To this day, he swears he went to bed, but when I went to sleep, he was watching, and when I woke up, he was watching. With his bloodshot eyes, he left my house, not as a boy, but as a man. A man who probably spanked the monkey on my computer chair. Gross. LimeWire, the website where you always downloaded the wrong version of the show you wanted. When I was about 7 years old, my friend and I stayed up pretty late watching TV. We came across some weird infomercial channel that was advertising body paint. All of a sudden, unclothed women pop up on the screen and these men started rubbing green paint all over their bodies. It then cut to an unclothed man that was wrapped in a plastic blanket that had the air sucked out of it. The women threw themselves on top of him and started rubbing their bodies on him. I got so paranoid that my friend's mom would walk in from the next room, but my friend was so intrigued by whatever the hell was that, and she dismissed all my pleas. I still have no idea what the heck we were watching. You were watching Real Hooking Up on HBO. That was the episode about people that like latex. Dude, watching something on late night HBO was my first experience too. I just remember it being a hot Asian woman and I was like, wow! I was around 7 years old. I had a rich friend named Kevin who could afford all sorts of cool toys because his dad imported and exported them, along with a bunch of other goods. During one sleepover, he brought over one of these remote control fart boxes. Instead of playing with it, we hatched a master plan to sneak it under my parents' bed and unleash its power when they were going to bed. We waited for hours. Finally, when the clock struck midnight, we let it loose. God damn it, Alan, my mother said. But it wasn't over. We didn't spam it. We waited for them to settle and let it go again and again. Finally, we couldn't take it anymore. My parents had us cracking up, and my dad, as boisterous with his cologne as he is, realized it wasn't his butt. I used to be best friends with a popular girl at school, and our group of friends had sleepovers all the time. One night when we were 12 years old, I woke up all wet and she convinced me that it was really hot and we had just sweated all night. Then I started to think about the plastic cover on her bed and the frequent sheet changes, and it all made sense. She had peed the bed, and well, me too. Okay, not a sleepover technically, but more of a trip. My class went to a trip away and the boys slept in one room and the girls in another. Now, on one of the last days of this week-long trip, one of the boys in my class decided it would be a great idea for all of us to play together at the same time. So a group of 17 boys playing furiously in their sleeping bags was one of the most what the freak am I doing moments in my life, and that is a moment that I'll never forget. Also, at a school ski trip one year, there would be speed playing basically every evening of the week. I still don't know how we came up with this idea that finishing fast was the goal to aim for, or if it was really necessary to show the tissue as proof. But well, at least we had separate beds this time. In hindsight, the whole thing did feel less awkward than it probably should have. Bro, what? At our school, there was a big bunch of us guys. Not exactly all friends, but good friends who had other friends that hung out with them. An extended circle of about 40 mates. One guy, Stuart, was a bit dim. Not amazingly so, just slightly lower than average. He wasn't actually my friend, but we'd talk, played football, and walked home together, but never went out of the way to hang out. Anyways, whilst waiting someplace, we were talking and he told me that there was a game that a few guys played, Soggy Biscuit. The aim was to put a soggy biscuit on a post. After someone calls the start, they'd get their members out, and well, you know, the last one to finish had to eat the soggy biscuit. He then asked if I wanted to go and do it. I said no. Many years later, I'm in a pub and there is Stu, when we start talking and having a few drinks. After a few pints, I asked him if he had any soggy biscuits lately and we had a laugh. He thanked me for not telling others about it and not dropping him as a mate. He then tells me, I loved playing Soggy Biscuit. Most of the time, I used to lose just so I could eat it. Then he says, I used to kick up a fuss about eating it. Later on, I'd refuse to eat it and the others would hold me down and force the biscuit into my mouth. I asked you to join us because I wanted your Soggy Biscuit, and I still do. Here's my number. He then shaked my hand and left. I never called him, but I do wonder if anyone of the extended group joined him. Stu had no chill, and I actually got some more information about him. He got married to a girl, had a baby with her, got caught cheating with a man, and she kicked him out. Months later, she had the kid, but he wasn't allowed to see it. She lives in a terraced house, long row of attached houses with no front garden. He drives by the house to try to look into the windows to see the baby, sees it, gets excited, floors his flatbed truck and crashes into 3 parked cars, gets out and runs off. One of those cars belonged to a mutual friend's brother, who sees him running off and calls the cops. He ends up getting banned from driving, but does start to be able to see his kid. And they got back together. Okay, I thought the previous story was bad, but again, bro, what? Also, where was the sleepover? When I was 7 years old, me and my best friend had heard gunshots outside of his house late one night. It wasn't a completely unusual occurrence, so we didn't think much of it until we went outside the morning after and found his dog had been hit by one of the bullets. Family friends moved to a farm in rural Wisconsin because they thought living on a farm would be fun. The high school kids would drive around the county getting wasted and shooting people's dogs. Because, you know, country folk are normal people. Luckily, their dog only had their leg blown off. When they were finally caught, they had killed over 25 dogs and injured a bunch more. That's some psychopathic stuff right there. You think that's weird? When I was in the 8th grade, a new kid joined in the middle of the year. He was all kinds of awkward. He liked to wear pink shirts and talk about dissecting animals. Someone called him on his apparent BS and found out that he had been catching birds and squirrels to mess with. They straight up told the school on him, so they searched his house and found a crap ton of dead animals, including birds wrapped in duct tape, that were still alive when he did it. I just don't get how messed up people can get. I used to light popsicle sticks on fire and drop them in the tub. Real tough kid I was. Okay, well, I just want to say I hope those country kids got shown the country justice after hurting those dogs. As for that last kid, I'm pretty sure that's how the show Dexter started off. The serial killer, not the laboratory. When I was a kid, my mom had a friend who would always bring her son over to hang out. Anyways, they arranged a sleepover for us that he was especially stoked about. So when it's lights out, he almost immediately starts crying. He kept saying my mom wanted a girl over and over. I'm still not sure what the hell happened. Staying the night at a friend's house with a bunch of our buddies, when we were all in our mid-teens. We're all sleeping on the floor in this large room, fairly spaced apart, almost zero light. The slightly older sister of a friend whose house it was had been flirting with one of the guys all night, and while we were asleep, she snuck into the room. I think I was the only one still awake. From what I could make out in the darkness, she crawled over to the guy she had been flirting with, slid under his blankets, and got on top of him and started doing stuff. He had the biggest grin on his face the next morning and would answer, "I'm just happy to be here with you guys," whenever asked. I was in preschool and was sleeping at a friend's house down the street with my sister. In the middle of the night, I woke up to screaming and glass shattering, so I got out of bed and followed the noise into the lounge room. His parents were screaming at each other, and when they saw me, the mother came running over and pushed me into the bedroom and shut the door. Not something I'll forget anytime soon. A friend's mom and her fella started doing the deed when they thought everyone was asleep. I wasn't. His mom thought she was being quiet. She wasn't, and being a 14-year-old boy, I could not help but, do the needful thing. Dude, I was over at my friend's for a sleepover one time when I was like 11, and his parents just started going at it in the bedroom next door. It's like 7 p.m., and they have like 6 kids, and they're all awake. My friend just looks at me and casually says, "Mom, please," and then goes back to playing video games. I actually had a similar moment when I had to apartment sit for my brother one time, and his neighbor was definitely having a good night from what I could hear. She sounded kinda hot too. When I was younger, I spent the night at a friend's house for her birthday. All the other girls were asleep, but I couldn't sleep. I was bored, so I went to the bathroom and started playing with her mom's makeup and hair care products. What's the worst that could happen, right? Well, I got a chunk of my coarse, curly hair stuck in a hairbrush. I could not for the life of me get it out. I was too afraid to go rummaging around in the kitchen for scissors because I didn't want to wake up the other girls. So I tried pulling really hard and ripped out my hair. A full chunk of hair about 3 inches wide. I pulled it all out, crying silently the whole time, and then spent the rest of the night picking my hair out of the hairbrush with blood rolling down my forehead. It was traumatic. My conclusion? Sleepovers are dangerous. Once I had a friend over and he puked what looked like a gallon of mashed potatoes in my bed and blamed it on my 15-pound dog who was locked up in his kennel. Stupid Brad. I was about 8 or 9 years old at my mate's house watching The Exorcist. My mate's dad thought it would be funny to go outside and lift the window shutter and scream through the window. It was freaking terrifying. I wet the bed at a friend's house one time. The next morning, I told him that I grabbed some lemonade from the fridge in the middle of the night and spilled the whole cup. I was like 8, and they didn't have lemonade. Another kid and I got into the same sleeping bag and touched our things together because we thought it would mean that we lost our virginities. The other boys sat in a circle around us, egging us on. It was actually a lot like the last scene of Requiem for a Dream. Damn, I forgot about that movie. And that last scene was pretty crazy. New Year's Eve 99 to 2000. I was about 12. I woke up with a sleeping bag full of pee and my hand in a bowl of water. Until the end of the year, they made fun of me for not being Y2K compliant. I had a big birthday party sleepover when I was 11 or 12 and invited a bunch of my friends to spend the night. My mom made me invite the kid from down the road who was in my grade and never really got noticed. He was really small and took a lot of medicine. Anyways, he wet the bed that night and was humiliated by everyone there, including me. I saw him on the bus the following week and felt bad about what happened, and we hung out most weekends until the end of high school. He told me that he had a liver transplant in kindergarten and was facing some serious health threats in the future. And last summer his liver failed and he passed away in hospice care at the age of 25. We lost touch after high school, which is what happened with most of my old friends. He messaged me on Facebook this time last year, wanting to catch up. We chatted for a bit and I told him that I would visit him the next time I was in town. He didn't say anything about his failing health, and I wish he had. I would have made a special trip back home to see him. It's been a year and I've been thinking about him more than usual lately. I miss him a lot. Man, that was a tough read. I always look back on those awkward friends or classmates that I had in high school and wondered if they had any medical or mental health issues. Not something you think about when you're young. Not particularly eventful or spicy, but when I was in middle school, my friend had a birthday sleepover with about 8 or 10 girls. Around 10 p.m., we decided to all sneak out and go TP some boy's house. We go and TP the house. Then we realize we are lost, and we don't know how to get back to her house. So we find the closest main road and just start walking down it. About 8 to 10 middle school girls in their PJs. So naturally, a police officer stopped us and asked what we were doing up so late. Must have been a really awesome cop because we make up some stupid story about looking for a lost cat. We all pile into the car and he takes us back to her house, where we ask him to turn off the lights and let us walk up. This is a true story, but you probably won't believe it is. I was staying the night at a friend's house when I was 8 years old. My foster brother was there too. My friend asks if we want to see a cool trick. We say yes. He lays down on the floor, pulls his pants down and lifts his feet up to his face. He's wearing tighty whities, but what happens next is so crystal clear in my memory. He farts and a small black spot about the size of a dime begins to darken by his butt. Then it gets darker and a hole appears before my eyes. He burnt a hole through his underwear with his fart. See, I told you you wouldn't believe me. I didn't believe it either. We told him to do it again, and he did. This time I watched very closely, and after a minute of him getting a fart ready, he lets loose the same quiet fart with the short and the fresh pair of briefs began to darken. My foster brother and I are standing by, watching this feat with scientific scrutiny. The dime-sized spot goes darker and darker, but it doesn't look wet. There's no flame, though it looked like I was watching something burn in the sun. You know how sunlight makes flames nearly invisible? That's how this fart looked by the light of the bedroom lamp. So then the hole forms and all of this takes place in just 4 or 5 seconds. There is a little smoke, though I may have imagined it. The smell is like a fart plus hot rubber. My foster brother and I deliberated and requested a third demonstration. He says he shouldn't because his mom gets mad when he burns holes in his underwear. It's not aliens or ghosts or Bigfoot. It's a young boy with the ability to burn a hole through his cotton underwear with his flatulence. And I swear to God that it's true. Another odd thing was that his brother came in an hour earlier and offered us toothpaste. When we declined, he shrugged and ate a third of the tube in one squeeze. I'm sure I already said this a bunch this video, but bro, what? This one time my high school friend jumped from a 3rd floor and fell into a coma. We were having a guys' night, getting wasted, everything was normal. My friend and his cousin decided to light up some herb. My phone rang and it was my friend's mom. She wanted to talk to him since his phone was out of battery. He was sitting on the couch and I was heading towards him with my phone in my hand. When he saw me heading for him, he freaked the freak out like he saw some kind of demon or monster or something and ran to the balcony and just jumped. He hit his head on a tree going down and fell into a coma and was out for 2 years and a bit. He ended up waking up one day like everything was normal, but he ended up dying a few hours later due to organ failure. His parents blame me since they believe I was the one that handed him the stuff and all that, and that I was the one to blame for inducing the fear that made him jump. My conscience is clear, but what I had to go through to not be seen as responsible, police, family, his and mine, friends and colleagues, was hell. Damn, that's a crazy story, but am I the only person who had a childhood that didn't involve getting wasted? My best friend was a very tomboyish girl, and one time when I was younger, I was sleeping over at her house. This time, 2 of her attractive female cousins happened to be there for the evening as well. I forgot how it came up, but they started talking about how they had never seen a peepee, and were asking me to show them. Now, I was a very shy kid and raised by very conservative parents, so this took a little persuading. But after an hour of them asking, we went into her bathroom, shut the door, and I whipped it out. Man, this is definitely one of those Dear Penthouse stories. When we were about 15, my buddy stole some drinks from his parents and invited me over to drink it with him. When I got there, I had to take a crap. and was only gone about 5 minutes, and when I came back, he had drank almost everything. I called him a butthole and drank what was left, which actually got me a little buzz. We decided to watch a movie and I noticed he wasn't looking good. He then puked all over the floor. His mom was downstairs and I didn't want to get caught, so I started cleaning it up. But then he just kept puking, like 3 more piles. I got him to the bathroom and he looked at me and said, "Guess what?" I said what, and then he started peeing his pants and laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. I got him back to his bed and he barfed again. This was like the 4th or 5th pile. I had only gotten 1 cleaned up so far. And not cleaned up very well, I was kinda wasted. He got out of bed and took his pee-soaked pants and underwear off and was looking for new pants. And that's when I decided I had enough. I wasn't going to deal with the barf and a naked person who was going to do nothing to help the situation. On my way out the door, I told his mom that he wasn't feeling well and left. When I got home, my parents knew that I was wasted and grounded me. His mom blamed everything on me and called my parents to tell them that I got her little angel wasted. Any parents that unironically refer to their kid as a little angel is usually a bad parent from my experience. Slept at a friend's house. Friend had a cat. Woke up with the cat sleeping on my face. I panic. Cat panics because I'm panicking. Cat claws my face. I have hated cats ever since. Screw head sleeping cats. I went to visit my aunt in Cali one year, and well, I crashed out on the futon. Come to find out, said futon was normally the cat's bed. At first, I flattened it out to a normal bed, but I kept waking up with this gigantic fat cat sleeping on me, or snuggled up so close I couldn't help but wake up. So I think, screw this time I just leave it on the couch. Had the weirdest dream I couldn't breathe and woke up in a panic to a 19-pound cat sleeping on my damn head. Well, this is just another reason for me not to like cats.
What does your family do that you didn't realize was bizarre until later on in life? Okay, so my mom was a pretty crappy parent. She didn't really teach me a lot and I was left alone most of the time. Most of the things I learned were from my cousin because she paid her to watch me while she would go to work or be messed up somewhere. I don't know. Never took me to an amusement park or anything. It was all my cousin. Anyway, as a kid, I firmly believed in Santa Claus, and that was because my mom didn't buy me Jack as a kid. It was always my cousin getting me things and taking me places, and for Christmas I would always get really good things. Like I would get a PS2, games I really wanted, a stereo, etc. $700 a month disability money because I'm disabled. Anyways, for those reasons, I firmly believed in Santa Claus, and I remember vividly kids in middle school telling me it was my mom, and I 100% did not believe in them to the point I started crying about it. All the cool gifts were from Santa as well, by the way. All the gifts my mom would get me were socks, shirts, etc. My mom also reinforced that Santa was real. Hell, I believed in the Tooth Fairy for the same reason, since I'd get $5 for every tooth I lost. Fast forward to just recently-ish, I'm 26, and I find out all the gifts from Santa were from my cousin and her mom. They would give my mom gifts for me every year, and every year my mom would take off the name tag and replace them with Santa. I even remember her telling me how specifically my cousin and aunt didn't get me any Christmas gifts while growing up. I feel like she felt inferior or something because my cousin cared more about me and got me expensive gifts. When I grew out of the Santa thing, I actually believed my mom got me all those gifts and was using my disability money for them. Cause like, every year I'd get a ton of good stuff. It now makes a lot more sense. My cousin always knew what stuff I liked cause we liked the same things. I even remember the year I got a GameCube and how whenever I'd go to her house, I'd want to play her GameCube to play Harvest Moon. And that Christmas, what game did I get with my GameCube? Harvest Moon. I never told my mom I wanted Harvest Moon. It was only my cousin that knew, so I fervently believed it was Santa that knew I wanted it through magic or whatever. Really bad that my mom did that to my cousin and her mom, but this isn't even the worst thing she'd done. I could write a book about how terrible a person she is. So I wouldn't have said the mom was that bad until they mentioned that they were actively hiding the cousin and aunt were buying them gifts. That bit was like, ooh, okay, maybe she is that bad. Because not buying luxury items isn't a terrible thing. That's what it is. It's a luxury. It's not a basic necessity or anything like that. Because basic necessities, when you get older, you realize that's what matters. When you're a kid, you're all about the PlayStation 2. When you're adult, you're like, oh yes, socks and underwear for Christmas. Ooh. Maybe more context is needed, but yeah, it does sound like they kinda sucked.
To keep me from watching too much TV, my dad told me that we had a 1 hour limit on our TV viewing. As in, we paid for 1 hour of TV per day, and any more than that we would be charged extra for. Like AOL back in the day. When I started going to friends' houses where the TV was always on, I got a bit suspicious, but I just figured they had more money than we did. Eventually, after watching TV for hours and hours with one friend, I asked her how much TV they paid for, and she just looked at me like I was nuts. So I guess lying to your kids because it's easier than getting into a fight over a rule you want to enforce is the bizarre thing my family did.
I'm of two minds on this one. 1, obviously it's not good to lie to your children. 2, I don't blame them if they wanted them to get away from the TV and go out and be active and stuff, because a prevalent issue nowadays is people having too much screen time. Like, I see some parents out and about, they hand their babies mobile phones and stuff. It's like, what the hell? I understand if they've got like learning programs on there or things specifically for them, but I just don't think it's very good for their development. I don't think kids should be raised on technology. I only got a phone. Granted, I got a phone in like 2006. I got a little flip Nokia. It was a basic phone, had nothing else. That's all I used it for. But now I just feel like phones and tablets and stuff, when they just hand it off to their kids, it just feels like they're trying to distract them and not engage with them or teach them anything themselves. You're supposed to be there for them. You're supposed to engage with your kids, for God's sake. Anyway, that's just a little rant I've got, I guess.
Having no shame being nude. At least in America, that's weird. Granted, my father was not wandering the house nude as he has all daughters, but my mother, 0 craps given. My sister, mom, and I just have no shame. I'm eating breakfast. Mom wanders into the kitchen naked to do her neti pot thing. I'm trying to take a bath. Here's mom or sissy trying to have a conversation. Walk into mom's bathroom. Literally every door leading there wide open. Mom taking a bath. Stop and have a chat. Same with my sister. I've had so many damn bathtub conversations with my sister and mom. Also, my mom's total nonchalance about being naked around my best girlfriend. No, they weren't uncomfortable. She asked or warned them. She just wanders around naked sometimes. So now I'm just always naked in my own home. Blinds open or not, I literally just don't even notice. Being nude is just my inherent natural state.
I mean, TMI, but if absolutely no one is around and whatnot, yeah, it's pretty nice to walk around in the nude, but like when there's company about, it's like, well, it's a bit weird, yeah, like that's my standard, you know, I'm not gonna enforce my standard on people, but, you know, kind of weird.
Yeah, my boyfriend found this super weird and gets upset that I don't close the bathroom door all the way. He had 4 cats and my parents had 4 daughters with 1 bathroom. Privacy while you pooped was just not happening. I'm almost 30 and still find myself wandering into the bathroom while my mom's doing her thing when I visit to chat. It's just our normal. Also, my dad never wore pants when he was home. Tidy whities and a shirt is how most of my friends met him. I remember one of my sisters pleading with him to put on pants because her boyfriend was coming over, and he was just like, I pay the mortgage. I don't have to wear pants, which has become my life creed.
You heard the man, love. He pays the mortgage. Now, I agree, though. When company is coming around, just put some freaking trousers on. Here's the thing. Here's the rule. Shirtless, all right. Pantsless, nah, that's a no-go. Not when company's about.
When I was younger, my whole extended family, except the ones in Germany, would share a farm together and go there on the weekends. We would spend the whole day weeding, raking, other chores, and goofing off outside. And at night, we would eat only potatoes and gravy, and the men would drink beer. After that, all of us kids would go into the living room and watch VHS tapes of adult movies that were probably too inappropriate for us to be watching at that age. We would do this till 11 while the adults talked and played games, and then we would all go home as my grandmother and grandfather were the only people who lived there permanently. That farm has been in the family for a long time.
That sounds like a damn good time, a hootenanny even. I'd love to go to a farm and, like, you know, get drunk with my relatives, talk, play games, drink beer. I mean, maybe not beer, I'm more of a cocktails guy and all that. Or watch inappropriate movies and stuff. Like, I don't know if he meant, like, you know, adult movies or he meant more like just inappropriate films for kids like Final Destination, or as I would be watching when I was like, I don't know, 10 years old, From Dusk Till Dawn. That's a great film. I freaking love that movie.
My mom would let me and my brother run around naked for about 10 minutes before our bath, around ages 2 to 3, so we wouldn't want to take our clothes off in front of company. because she read that some titlers do that, but creating a time to be naked stopped it, I guess, and she didn't want to risk it or something. And she also would give us our popsicles in the bath or shower until we were about 4 so she could just hose us down and we didn't get everything sticky while eating.
I don't actually blame her. Lollipops, anything like a popsicle or a lollipop, you gotta be careful with kids. I know until the age of like 5 or 6, I think, I could not be trusted with a lollipop. I would get sticky. I'd be holding it at arm's length, and then next thing I know, what the hell's going on with my hair? Why is my hair sticky? I didn't put it anywhere near my head. My hair's all sticky, and my mom and my brother would be all, "Get your rollers out, Edna," because I had long, gorgeous blonde locks, and they'd get all curled up and sticky and horrible. I'd hate it. I'd cry even. When we watched movies, we would discuss what was happening, what we thought of the characters, or just random things that we thought of during the movie. When I would watch movies at my friend's house, they found this very annoying, and I didn't realize people just sat in complete silence for 2 hours. I have since broken the habit, mostly, but when I meet up with my family, it's the same as it used to be. I also do this with very specific people that are down for it. I have a friend who I watch a movie and there's like a bunch of anime with on weekends and stuff. When we have the time, we get together, we just watch random stuff. We've been watching like Back to the Future. We recently watched Homeward Bound, which was a lot less sad than I thought it was gonna be. He wanted to make me cry. And we just comment on things, make jokes every now and then. Like, it's just a thing that we do. Otherwise, though, I am perfectly fine to sit in complete silence while watching a film. Cult stuff. I didn't know it was a cult until I became an adult, grew up in a Christian group. They had their own church and school. I wasn't allowed to talk to people from outside both church and school my whole childhood. Even neighbors I got in trouble for. This is the kind that teaches you homosexuality is evil, Pope is evil, Obama is evil, Trump is evil. Hell, I got a detention for using female hair products because it was gay, and that was 2011 in Canada. It was crappy, I guess, but the time I tried to self-delete with a bottle of whiskey, my parents' response was to ground me for life because I went and partied. I told them why I did it. They sent an elder from the church to talk to me, and the grounding remained. They had their own business too, so at 16 you'd work and get paid normally for the church folk. Being an adult, I left, but I had no clue just how sheltered it is, and how crazy sheltered I was as a kid. 20 is when I got away, and it was like this magical adventure world where nothing was like it was supposed to be. That sounds like utter hell, and although this was about Christianity specifically, I want people to remember no matter what part of the political or religious spectrum you are on and what you believe in, if you are too dedicated to a specific ideology in which you put it before the people around you, the people that care and love you, you're going to taint, corrupt, and hurt those around you, and probably just ruin any impression that people have of you and what you believe in, and that goes for everyone.
Not brushing teeth. We were never taught to actually make a habit out of brushing our teeth growing up. Our parents didn't either. We used to get shown those fun educational videos in school when we were kids. The ones with the big cartoon toothbrush who tells you how to brush your teeth. But I never actually took them seriously. I thought toothbrushing was just something people on TV did, not an actual real thing, until my first sleepover with a friend around 5th or 6th grade. We were getting ready to go to sleep and I looked at her like she was crazy because she was actually brushing her teeth. And she looked at me like I was crazy because I wasn't brushing my teeth. I didn't have many sleepovers as a kid, so I just put it down to sleepover weirdness and carried on not brushing my teeth until I started getting tooth pains in my late teens. Went to the dentist. He asked when the last time I'd brushed was, and I swear he nearly fainted when I answered. Safe to say I brush my teeth now, but a less gross one, maths. When my siblings and I were little, our mother used to make up maths worksheets for us to do. She'd sit down and handwrite a bunch of simple, real simple, we were kids, maths questions down. Give us a sheet each and just let us work through them. It wasn't forced or anything though. We never had to do it, but we wanted to. It was like a game to us. We'd ask her to do it for us. I didn't realize that not everyone's mother would do that or read to them each night before bed. Even my first teacher commented on how much further along my reading was than the other kids when I first started school. I thought this stuff was standard until I started talking to other kids about it and realized nobody else in my class did it.
Save for the disregard for oral hygiene, which by the way, kids, seriously, brush your teeth every day. Make sure your mouth is clean and healthy. It is important. You can get sick, and I think in some cases you can even die if your mouth is like really badly kept. But that's the extreme. And on the other hand, though, these parents are clearly engaged in wanting to teach their kids stuff. I mean, that's a problem that I've talked about before, I think. A lot of parents just aren't engaging with their kids and actively trying to teach them stuff. I have a close personal friend who was a primary school teacher for a while, and she told me about a couple kids who didn't have like major learning difficulties or anything, just didn't know how to wipe their butts because their parents just didn't bother to teach them how. Neglect is a form of abuse, people.
When I was a kid, we opened all of our Christmas presents after dinner on Christmas night. All of my friends opened them on Christmas morning or sometimes even Christmas Eve. But we waited with all of the family, including grandparents and aunts and uncles and the whole damn fam. Dinner was eaten, dishes were done, drinks were served, and we all sat together for several hours and opened Christmas presents. I don't do that with my own family now, but I do kind of miss the tradition.
I frickin' love Christmas. Christmas frickin' rocks. I'm not like fanatical about it, but I like it. I love the atmosphere, the snow, the goodwill, and cartoon Christmas specials back in the day absolutely rocked. My mother is a member of the Slavic pagan cult. In my childhood, there was nothing strange for me in bloody sacrifices for different gods. It was a bit of a holiday for me. In the courtyard, we had an altar where mother often performed rituals. However, in the end, my father could not stand this pizdец and broke up with her. But now I can easily write fantasy books on the knowledge that I received in my childhood. I even tried in Russian. I am from Russia, but I am not very good at composing stories. And no, it had no effect on my mind. Unless I'm not so worried because of blood, death, etc. I am not cruel. I have quite normal relations with people around me. Now I am 22 and I am IT student, and of course I am not pagan. By itself, the sacrifices were hens, pigs, and other livestock animals. Most often they were not for the fire god, so most often this event ended in a feast.
I actually once went on a date with a woman who claimed to be a practicing pagan. I mean, paganism itself is an umbrella term for a few different things that have either been discarded or forgotten, and people don't really talk about that much openly, but I don't know, the whole concept seems kinda cool to me. All different gods respecting nature and all that.
I don't know if it's bizarre, but my parents had arguments in front of us when we were kids. Not knocked out, drag out fights or anything, but they disagree and hash it out verbally, sometimes loudly. Now that I'm married and have grown-up friends and such, almost my entire social circle never saw their parents argue or fight.
I'll be honest, I've witnessed some awful arguments and fights between my parents, but I do know someone whose parents literally never argued in front of them, and they are simultaneously the least confrontational but also most dangerous person I know, because they literally study the way of the blade. They do Bushido stuff. The man can roll into a stance while holding a samurai sword and slash that thing out smooth as butter. I have held his katanas. They are authentic and sharp, and I also had the honor of attending his daughter's christening very recently. Confrontation is an inevitable thing, people. You should be prepared for it in all manners, whether it just be an argument or whether it be someone actually trying to cause real physical harm to you. Because some people just freak out over the most mundane things, and you know what, maybe that's part of the reason why. Your parents didn't argue enough in front of you. It's a regular thing that happens. Arguments can sometimes be the way that you can solve problems.
I had a less than traditional upbringing due to my two juvenile delinquent older sisters, but despite all of that, my family has always been very full of love. Every goodbye or goodnight was always accompanied by, "I love you." It wasn't until I started dating my now husband that I realized not all families do this. He'd get off the phone with his mom and just say, "Bye," and I'd be shocked at the rudeness of it. He's adopted the habit with me now because I've never stopped. I've always felt loved by my parents no matter what was going on because of the constant effort to remind ourselves that we love one another.
Solidarity, sister. I literally do the same thing with my family and even my very close friends. I believe that anything can happen. I could be snatched from this existence at any point for any reason. So I let those around me who I truly, deeply care about know that I love them, even if it might be a bit embarrassing for them when I say it to them in public.
I just realized today, probably not that strange, but my family would go to the movie theater when we knew it was going to be a rainy or stormy day. We would go see a movie and then look at the weather, and if it was still bad outside, we would just hop into another movie. I never knew it was wrong or anything. I was like, sweet, we get to watch more movies. Never got caught as I remember, but I'd never be bold enough to do it now.
Sneaking into a film isn't the worst thing I can think of, but I have never done it and I don't intend to because I have a lot more respect for my local establishments. Because the fact of the matter is, people, if these places don't make money, then they just disappear. And then suddenly, oh, you live in a food desert. Or, oh, there's nothing to do. And then a big shadowy corporation buy up the property for a cheap price and then build houses. They own the houses, price up those houses. And people can't actually afford to buy them, and then they're renting those places forever. Men were considered inferior and violent. We weren't allowed anything resembling a weapon, including army men. Weren't allowed violent toys, no sugar, very rarely allowed time with friends. Most mornings I'd wake up to find I was grounded for one reason or another, along with my brother, and we were locked in the room all day. Food and water twice a day, bathroom at the same time. No blinds or curtains, no beds. We were allowed a mattress. If we were allowed outside, it was to do chores, usually the more physical ones like weeding or picking up rocks. I still have panic attacks if I feel trapped. When I stayed in the hospital overnight last year, they were kind enough to help me walk around so I wouldn't stress out, but it was a bloody awful experience. Anyway, I assumed all families were absolutely horrible and this was pretty normal until I actually spoke to people about it. My grandmother raised me, and I keep this light orb thing I made of her ashes as a nightlight to remind myself that even the worst pieces of crap can be useful. I defer back to my comment earlier about how extreme ideologies can really corrupt, taint, and harm people around you. But always remember that you have the opportunity to be better than the people that hurt you.
Happy one. My parents combined their last names without a hyphen, so we have a unique name. It took me a while to realize other people existed with my friends' same first and last names. It really weirded me out. Mildly happy one. I was raised not to argue with my siblings, and it was forbidden not to get along, so we got along. Not as happy. I thought everyone's parents would just take random bins of their precious things, including clothes, pajamas, toys, books, etc., and put them in the basement and never give them back, even when they said they would. Very unhappy. I thought everyone's parents would scream at them if they ever asked why they were doing something or ever said anything the parent didn't 100% agree with. Maybe everyone does do this, though.
Well, that certainly went from happy to sad to me lamenting that some people just should not be parents. Obviously, this person's parental figure lacked any and all emotional maturity where they couldn't even handle their child disagreeing with them.
I grew up in a Christian subculture known as Mennonite. A lot of the ways I was raised would be considered bizarre. No TV, no internet until I was in 6th grade at least. No going to the movies, bowling alleys, or skating rinks. I wasn't allowed to wear shorts. And no other worldly styles such as Christian rock, rap, etc. My mom wears long skirts and a covering on her head and is often mistaken for either a Catholic nun or Amish. We had a whole laundry list of do's and don'ts. At the time, it didn't seem bizarre because that's all I knew. Of course, I knew others were different, but that was of little consequence to me. That said, I value my upbringing. I was raised with a strong work ethic and a fantastic moral foundation, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
I like that this guy takes the bad with the good. He doesn't directly deride the Mennonite thing or even say that he doesn't live by it anymore. It's kind of up in the air. He doesn't say. But I think that this kind of calls back to the guy who doesn't brush his teeth, but yet his parents still taught him maths and English and stuff where they're clearly engaged with him on a level where it's like, yeah, those parents are good people, and yet they have a blind spot. They just didn't care about oral hygiene. But it doesn't mean they don't love them or anything like that. I mean, kids, here's the thing. You're never going to have all the answers in the future. There's always going to be a blind spot, or you're going to mess up or something, and that's the way parents are. It's just a fact. My mom raised me on her own. I remember realizing that, wow, my mom doesn't actually know what she's doing. She's just doing her best. And I've turned out okay.
When my little brothers were babies and they needed to poop, my mother would pick them up, plop them on her lap, and hold them over the trash can in the kitchen. So she'd just be sitting on a chair with the trash can in front of her, letting their turds plop out their butts in full view of us. It's a lot easier than cleaning a dirty diaper later. The weird part is doing this even when I had friends over. They don't come over anymore.
Maybe it's because you sound like a little gremlin man. No, kind of gross, but I understand the logic. I just, learned to wrap a nappy though. There's a road tunnel about 20 minutes from where we grew up. It's about 2,000 yards long, and when we drove through it, we all had to hold our breath. No other tunnels, just that one. I thought everyone did it and was surprised when I found out they didn't. Also, if you bring someone a present from your holiday, it's referred to as a rabbit. Again, I was surprised that it's just our family that does that. This isn't a family thing, but when I was a kid, I used to hold my breath whenever I saw like a character in a cartoon or a video game underwater and try to hold it for as long as they're underwater, because my logic was, if I can hold my breath for as long as they can underwater when I'm in this situation, I'll be fine because I've been practicing. No, it doesn't work like that. It really doesn't work like that. I remember doing it while watching the Tarzan cartoon. I think it was the episode where Clayton's sister comes and wants revenge for her dead brother.
D&D players of Reddit, what is the most creative character you've seen someone play as? I once kidnapped a player character wizard and replaced them with a high-level illusion created by the BBEG. The player then had to control the illusion from the perspective of the BBEG. That's Big Bad Evil Guy, pretending to still be a member of the party. It was surprisingly effective. Just as they reached the BBEG, they were slowly realizing he wasn't helping much anymore. I played as a Wemmick back in college, and I loved that character. He was a druid, and thus could only carry wooden weapons. So, after thinking about it, I gave him a lance, and then proceeded to get every feat you could for a knight on horseback. Trample, charges, etc. I leveled like a monster class instead of a player class, aka slow as snails, but man, it was a hella fun character. He could do some insane damage by the end of the game, and if he had to get into close combat, he could do rake, bite for damage. My favorite part, though, were his two animal companions. The first was a weasel that took levels of thief. So it was our trap dismantler and eventually had vorpal front teeth, so it had a devastating bite attack. The second was, and I'm not kidding, a giant white blood cell. It had been magicked out of a giant and made even larger, and it rode around on my druid's back. As the group's healer, it would blob onto them and heal them with a few levels of cleric. Mind you, my druid was teamed up with the lizardman barbarian, who was surprisingly smart, and the fey bard that would drink anything put in front of him, which is how he ended up as a half-elf woman of a different alignment by the end of the game. The fey had a long-standing thing about drinking anything put in front of him. The campaign was heading to a big showdown between our ragtag group and what we thought was a terrible wizard. As it turned out, she was a high-level alchemist and had been using her potions to do much of her deeds. Unfortunately, when she was gone, all of her potions were sitting there, and the Fae decided, why not? Then panicked when he changed gender and drank something else, then another, and kept rolling hysterically on this table the DM had whipped up. A camel. Not just any camel, but a racing camel named Rocket Boots. We had a party member who was inconsistent about showing up for the games, and he showed up in the middle of a short campaign we were running after we had received a stolen racing camel. It's hard to say exactly what it was, but the guy went ham role-playing this camel, making camel noises and doing camel things. It was absolutely hilarious. I haven't done it yet, but I've always wanted to play as a true polymorphed chair. The chair was turned into a human, or any player race, and then started learning, maybe becoming a wizard himself. I don't know how anyone would ever know since the change becomes permanent, but if he ever walked through an anti-magic field, he would just turn back into a chair and be gone forever, and no one else would walk through there for fear of being turned into a chair. I played with a 100% randomly generated character. I had a decent combo of class and race, half-elf and ranger, but my stats were completely dysfunctional for a ranger. My worst stats by far were dex and wisdom. In fact, they were the worst in the group. I was the ranger that could do everything a ranger was not supposed to do, and nothing that a ranger was actually supposed to do. For one campaign, I played a gnome illusionist and put all the points into alchemy. With my starting gold, which the DM gave us way too much, and few limitations, I bought a riding dog, 2 saddlebags of holding, and then another for my own carrying. I spent the rest of my gold on all the mundane gear you could possibly imagine. I used a spreadsheet to track it because the DM was irritated. I had 3 years of food and water, 3 tents, 10 cots, a collapsible bathtub, gnome-sized, everyone else can bring their own, a collapsible chair and desk for scribing scrolls, a portable alchemist lab, all manner of rope, poles, tools, containers, and even a few weapons. I packed trail cakes, fine wine, and a few pounds of honey. I think the only other magic items I took besides the bag of holding was a firestone. Don't recall the exact name, but it produced a fire from small campfire up to huge bonfire and renewed the item after 8 hours or so. I wish that campaign had gone on longer. I really enjoyed pulling random stuff out of my bag and then making the DM refer to the printed copy I had handed him 2 weeks ago, showing that yes, I did in fact have half a pound of marbles. Well, at least you didn't lose them. I gotta go. Bye-bye. My current campaign is made entirely from players who are new to D&D, myself included. So when building characters, my friend rolled mostly average stats, with the exception of intelligence, so he has a -3 in that. So we basically determined that he's illiterate. During our campaign, he also referred to the DM as God as a joke, and he kept asking questions like, "All right, God, what do we do about this?" So I made a joke that it looks like his character is actually communicating with God on a regular basis, but everyone around him just thinks he's insane and will never believe him. He then got the personality trait, Divine Guidance, which allows him to have a helpful hint once per campaign session. So canonically, his character can communicate with God, but to everyone else, he's just talking to himself as a result of his intellectual ineptitude. In plain English, a monk who fought everything by punching it repeatedly in the privates, Pathfinder monk with the maneuver master archetype who spammed dirty trick maneuvers. The look on the DM was priceless when they read the rules. Here's how it went. I tripped the tiger. Okay. Rolls the dice. Yep, the tiger's now prone. I elbow dropped the tiger in his fierce privates. Okay, so a regular unarmed strike. Oh, no. There are rules for that. No, there aren't. I beg to differ. The rules are this. You can attempt to hinder a foe in melee as a standard action. This maneuver covers any sort of situational attack that imposes a penalty on a foe for a short period of time. Examples include kicking sand into an opponent's face to blind him, pulling enemy's pants down to have his speed, or hitting a foe in a sensitive spot to make him sickened for a round. Huh. I guess you can punch the tiger in the privates. All the fights went from epic fantasy battles to this monk pocket sanding, private punching, and pantsing his way through every enemy. I don't know if there are any Joy Quest fans that are listeners to these kind of videos, but I was the dungeon master for Joy Quest, and I actually had a very similar situation to this. One of the players played literally as Jackie Chan, but he kind of named himself as like Jackie Chan. He actually had to fiddle around with this as well by implementing the way of the open hand in scenarios that weren't combat. So arm wrestling. So in one of the episodes, he actually tried to do like a bunch of different dexterity checks, and he tried to like slime and gum up his hands with a bunch of spit or some spilled ale, and basically try to cheat his way to the prize. Players. I've got a friend who is a weird character machine. Most recently is an orc named Sterog who believes that weapons are a coward's weapon, and beats people to their end with his shields. Before that was Robert the Destroyer, a barbarian who threw ladders at people. There was $3.50, or tree fitty, to his friends, a really creepy monk who could shoot vines out of his hands like Spider-Man. Villigamish, a 5e warlock who halfway through a random goblin encounter realized he was terminating them for no reason and became a staunch defender of goblin rights. Harold the Great and Powerful was a bard who was absolutely useless, but invested everything in bluff and insisted he was a high-level wizard. Also had a penchant for buying people's souls and then pushing them towards positions of power. The Bear Witch Project, aka Bwip, or Bruce Berner was a lycanthrope witch that spent most of his time in half-bear form. When asked what his gut feelings were on a topic, he responded with, "I have many feelings on guts." And of course, Justin Chandler, a shaman who saved literally all his gold till level 7, then used it to permanently enlarge and awaken his pet frog and deck it out with sweet gear. A player made a dwarf who was actually a very small human raised by dwarves. He was a barbarian and was modeled after Macho Man Randy Savage. He had a pet Wolverine, which he would throw at people screaming, "The fastball special!" The Wolverine didn't last too long. Randy, throughout the campaign, slowly went insane due to his fear of magic. Randy then began cutting people's hands off for no apparent reason, and the legend of Macho Man ended when he attempted to suplex a dragon. Suplexing a dragon. I mean, this sounds like an epic tale if you think about it. Just like this little man's like walking up this huge like ancient dragon just,
"Mere mortals, they feared me for thousands of years. What will you do?"
"I'll do like I always do. I'm gonna go in for that suplex. You need yourself a Slim Jim." And then unfortunately is crushed. Wow, what a tale. It's been a long time, but as I remember it, my buddy was using Middle-earth as the setting. My character was an elf with polymorph abilities, hung out in Mirkwood, and while transformed as various woodland creatures, spied on passerby on behalf of Galadriel. Spending 100+ years in Mirkwood changed her into something a bit more enty. Not physically, just personality. Lazy. Likes to talk about trees. At this point, I wasn't tainted with min-maxing or metagaming, so I was more than content to make this weird, awesome elven forest woman with no social or combat skills and send her into an adventure based on subterfuge, navigating deserts, and combat. I was also interested in making an elven woman who wasn't the Tolkien archetype. More awkward, homely, blunt, super into trees and tree stuff, and not the usual, "let's make dope skyscrapers out of these redwoods" way, but more like, "let me tell you which tree sap tastes best right off the bark." So she ended up being whisked away, reassigned to an adventure in the east past Mordor, in a desert where, according to the DM, Tolkien's mentioned in only one paragraph, blue wizards were hiding. She was very upset with her reassignment. Over the course of the adventure, because wizards, she got stuck as a parrot, rode another character's shoulders. Perfect disguise. Lots of scouting, lots of complaining about not being in Mirkwood, and also being a parrot. Many Mirkwood facts. Mirkwood reminiscences, drawing maps of Mirkwood in the sand with a talon. The entire time, I had her advising the party that returning to Mirkwood would be the best option. That said, when the enemy least expected it, BAM! Sleet mist and trash talk punctuated with whacks, surprisingly effective. We never finished the campaign, so I like to imagine she just abandoned them at some point, and there's a colorful parrot flying happily around Mirkwood, perching on a character who's actually from Mirkwood, not Treebeard, who I've been reminded is from Fangorn. See? All I know is Mirkwood squawk, nothing else. It was fun to think about this again after all this time. Now I'm probably going to remake her as an important NPC in my new wilderness adventure-based campaign. I don't know why, but for some reason when I imagine this like very chill elven woman who's just so attached to the forest, whenever she's like in like this parrot form, I just picture Iago. So like, can you imagine like that change between just like, "Hello, I am an old elven woman here to guide you on your path back to Mirkwood," to, "Hey, you know what? I don't like being a parrot. This is ridiculous. Hey, let's go back to Mirkwood and check out the tree bark, huh?" Blah! I once played a game where the players did not know any of their stats. Everything was run by descriptions like, "you're really good at getting into places that you shouldn't," picklock skill, or "you're bleeding from several wounds and are nearly at death's door." If it were that kind of game, the players wouldn't necessarily know where they were. By the way, it was the best campaign I'd ever been a part of. The GM was a freaking genius. We were in the Marines together, and he got orders to go to Korea. When he came back, he no longer played and wouldn't associate with us nerds anymore. dude was a natural, and I never found out just what happened. All I know is he didn't find religion, as suggested. I think he was met with anti-nerd peer pressure, which is funny because the nerds were also Marines, so there it is. A thief with one level of illusionist that passed himself off as an arch-wizard, throwing fireballs and screaming, "These beasts are immune to magic!" Ooh! in a fight, which was a funny experience. He was good at scamming NPCs, though. My character is similar to that, a thief that pretends that what he does is all magic. We were supposed to be infiltrating a cult that was gathering a presence in this town. The other people in my party joined the guard, and I was going to investigate the city's criminal underworld. And then I got distracted and ended up convincing a bunch of people of my magical power and how I can make them as good as me. So I became the kingpin of the criminal element in the city. It ended up not helping us find the cultists at all. But when we found them, I had an army. A necromancer who thought they were a cleric. Only the player and DM knew and had a list translating what the player said they were doing and what they were actually doing, i.e. spells, daily prep, so the others wouldn't catch on out of character. In his formative years, he came upon a book of forbidden spells. Being young and stupid, he assumed it was a book of divine rituals. Fast forward several years, and he wanders the land preaching about the everlasting life. He's skilled in first aid and potions because not every scrape requires divine intervention, but has some spells that will bring someone back from the brink of death. He also has a bodyguard who wears full plate armor, who follows him around because he owes a life debt. Doesn't talk much, though. The other players never discussed removing their own armor, or eating, or using the bathroom, so nobody found it odd that the NPC never did. The other players also never took points in Knowledge Arcane to discover the spell effects that didn't match what they should. Unfortunately, he got found out when one of the party members went down, and he turned them into a zombie. The players were then in on the joke and weren't able to separate what they knew and what their characters knew, which is why they weren't told from the start. If the party member hadn't gone down, there was a plan to have a personal quest, in a trial of faith style, to see if he could unintentionally turn himself into a lich, and if the party would help him do so. Mimic companions are what made me fall in love with the concept of tabletops and random chance. Just messing around with a friend of mine, he happened upon a mimic, fed it a live fairy that was annoying him, and it became his friend for life. That mimic NPC rolled natural 20s like it was his freaking job, and honestly, single-handedly carried the party, with a bit of help from a sentient severed goblin hand, for the rest of the series. All the players had terrible rolls for hours, and just sat in wonder while Mimic and Handy wrecked a Lich Dragon. All hail the mighty luggage. There was a campaign where the party came across a magical cauldron filled with boiling gold. They were told they could drop an item in and it would be turned to gold while retaining all of its other properties and be imbued with intelligence. They were warned that the said intelligence might be malevolent. While the party debated what to drop in, the gnome rogue jumps in. He became gold-coated, which increased his armor class significantly, but also became cursed with an evil alter ego. There was much rolling to determine when and for how long he was forced to play as chaotic evil. I played a human fighter. He was a carpenter, had a wife and children. He was a really kind man, so kind in fact, he didn't carry a weapon. He was non-violent. His flaw, however, was that he had a massive malignant brain tumor pressing on his amygdala. Since they didn't have CAT scans in this universe, no one knew that he had inoperable brain cancer. Whenever our party was in a situation that caused great stress, like combat for example, my character would slip into a sort of trance and go on a rampage in the battlefield. He was absolutely stacked in combat, so he would absolutely clean the hell up when it hit the fan. The gentle carpenter would turn into a snarling, mumbling maniac who royally crapped on anyone who dared oppose him. He would come out of the trance with no memory of the fighting. Since he didn't carry a weapon, this required some creativity, so I made my character a master of improvised weaponry. Before combat, I would ask the DM if there was anything in the room I could lift above my head. Whatever was nearest is what I used as a weapon. Chair, stones, dead enemy's femur, you name it. My character was a whirlwind of bottles, debris, and the occasional small animal. A true force to be reckoned with. His name was Buin the Machine Rodriguez. Buin? I mean, I'm still invested. This is a very cool character concept, kind of like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde scenario, but like with like actual medical knowledge behind it. But the name Buin throws me off. Is that like a short term for like brain, I guess? But I just can't help to be like, my name is Buin the Machine Rodriguez. So, you want me to use my fists, huh?
What did you totally misunderstand as a kid? When I was a child, we would go on a plane every time we'd visit Mexico, so I assumed Mexico was actually located in the sky. What? I used to believe that when you turned off the TV, it would pause. Was really upset when I would come back from dinner and my show would be over. That's so cute. I thought it was Pizza Hut, not Pizza Hut, until I was about 16 years old. I feel like such a douchebag laughing at these. Okay, I'll do one myself. When I was a really young boy, I didn't think we lived in England. I thought we lived in America because of all the American television I would watch, because I was a dumb butt. I would literally insist to my family, no, we live in America. We have dollars. I don't know why. I just didn't want to believe them. Oh, this one's going to be fun. SX. I had a massive misunderstanding of SX that could have severely injured my adult life had it not been corrected. When I was younger, I was obsessed with biology and animals, so I knew how everything fit together. But those damn Hollywood movies messed up my perception of how humans actually did the horizontal limbo. In movies, couples get all hot and heavy. The screen fades to black and they wake up naked together. I guess I filled in the blanks with my 7-year-old brain and thought that after you got aroused, you just fell asleep naked together. And the penis just sort of autopiloted itself over to the vagina, threw up and snaked back. So when people said they were sleeping together, I took this literally. Made for an awkward encounter with my dad when I was 12, when I suggested he just go to sleep with pants on instead of getting a vasectomy. I thought that when you grew up, you got a special card that allowed you to go to the bank and have some money printed when you needed some at the ATM. And when I heard about guerrilla warfare on TV, I thought it meant that there was an army of really angry guerrillas in other countries starting wars. I used to think that kidnapping was kids taking naps. I was very surprised as a kid to find out babies weren't pooped out and women had more than one hole. That if you got shot anywhere on your body, you would automatically die. I thought you had to marry someone who was born on exactly the same day as you were. I thought that God punished bad people and rewarded good people. Boy, was I wrong. When my parents used to talk about how things were black and white when we were watching TV, I thought they were talking about the whole world was black and white and wanted to know how everything was colored to what it is now. I had pictures of people painting grass in my head and thought this was the way the world was now colored. That'd be really trippy. One day you're like walking along and you see some grass that's just freshly grown in and it's all black and white, and then some people in a black van come in with a paintbrush and bucket and like paint over it, and they look at you and they're like, shh. The concept of race. In the 2nd grade, there was this little poetry contest, and the prompt was to write about the human race. I wrote about a bunch of people running. You know what? I think we'd all be better off if we just thought like this young man once did. I thought the actors actually died when they died in movies. Okay, no, I get that one. I totally get that. I mean, I remember being such a little dummy. I remember liking Star Wars, loving Obi-Wan Kenobi, and when my mom told me, oh, Obi-Wan Kenobi is the old man as well, you know, I'm like, no, he's not. Obi-Wan Kenobi's young and cool. I think really I didn't want to believe that he then turned into an old man and died. When 9/11 happened, I thought that the reason my morning cartoons weren't showing was because a plane had crashed into the building that made the cartoons. I thought the island Martha's Vineyard was owned by Martha Stewart. When I was about 9, Nickelodeon advertised a Nick Takes Over Your School contest. The commercial was filled with kids playing games, teachers getting slimed, etc. I was terrified that my school might win. Nick would take over for a full school year and that everyone would get held back a year since there didn't appear to be any learning going on in the commercials. The Civil War. Little kid version of me couldn't understand why America America was fighting over forks, knives, and spoons. What do they mean by that? Like, does anyone have an explanation for that? Please do say. I thought the car somehow knew whether we would turn left or right. I was amazed by those turn signals. Why Walt Disney wrote his last name with a backwards G. It does totally look like it says Gisney. Or would it be Gisney? That $20 was a lot of money. I thought firemen burned down buildings. This was because when I was 5 or so, our neighbors sold or donated their house to the fire department to help trainees. So every day for like a week, the fire department showed up and lit the house on fire. I guess I somehow missed the part where they then put the fire out. So for years, I was scared of firemen and thought they set houses on fire. It didn't come out until sometime later my parents gave me the whole, if anything bad happens, call the fire department talk. When I was young, I knew people did things on purpose when they meant to do them. I thought the word was unpurpose, though, and so naturally the opposite of unpurpose was purpose. Once in first grade, I was sent to the principal and I kept insisting that I had committed said offense purposely. I thought Harry Potter was about bunny rabbits because Beatrix Potter wrote Peter Rabbit, so by the laws of word association, it was a series of books about little rabbits going on adventures with their friends. Ah, the word association game is a boy. Yes, I'm familiar with it. I remember not knowing that all the Final Fantasy games were set in different universes up to a point, except for when they decided that it was going to be a sequel, whatever. And I just assumed that any blonde main character that I saw was like Cloud with a different haircut because Cloud was the first protagonist I knew about in the franchise. I used to think people died on their birthday because the headstones I had seen didn't have months and days, just how many years. There were 2 boys in my pre-K class named Juan and Raj. I called them One and Garage instead. No wonder they never shared their toys with me. I thought there was a government agency called the Management for Your Protection because toilet seat cover dispensers always said, provided by the management for your protection. Whenever I was in the car with my parents while stuck in a traffic jam, I would wonder why the person first in line was going so slow. If only that jerk sped up, we would all move faster. Oh, I've been there. I was convinced that white dog poop in the backyard was dinosaur fossils, and I believed that my dad fought a guy in a boxing ring to win my mom. I was staying at my friend's house for the day once and had one of those annoying sneezes that just don't come out no matter how hard you try. I told my friend about it and he told me that if I had a sneeze stuck and I couldn't get it out that I could die. Of course this screwed with my 8-year-old brain pretty hard. Never did die. I didn't know the difference between the words grape and rake and used them interchangeably. I'm not talking about actual grapes. I don't know if that translates well because of the censors. At around 10, I started changing my new little brother's diapers. My little brother was circumcised, so whatever. Being a 10-year-old little girl, I don't see much penis. One day, I changed my little cousin's diaper, and I'm totally concerned with the way his junk looks, only to find out years later that he was uncircumcised. I used to think cancer was when your eyes got swirly things in them and your head spun around endlessly. No clue where that idea came from. When I was little, I would hear commercials advertising things for just $5.99. I used to think they meant $5.99. I would tell my parents that I wanted to buy it because I had enough money, and they were always pretty amused. Like everything. One thing I can remember is that I thought the USA national anthem went like, by the dawn's early light, instead of by the dawn's early light, as though dawnzily was just another one of those many words I was familiar with as a kid. I thought it was maybe an adjective, like the orange glow of the morning sun cast a dawnzily mood over the park. I also thought as a very young kid that when you were fired from your job, the company killed you. I also thought dawnzily was a word because I thought that's how they said it in the American national anthem. Once again, only knowing the American national anthem because I watched so many TV episodes from American shows like The Simpsons. My parents used to take me on vacation when I was younger, and we'd leave out of Newark, New Jersey airport. When taking off, you can see Bayonne, New Jersey, and it's all docks and cranes and ships. One time, I pointed out the window to the cranes and asked my father what that place was. He said, Bayonne, and until I was about 18 years old, I thought no person lived there, only worked there. I imagined it was just cranes and ships and docks. There was an infomercial for some kind of griddle. All I remember was people tapping a frozen hamburger patty or frozen chicken breast on the griddle, and it swipes to the next shot of the food fully thawed and cooking. I thought you had to tap the food on the griddle to turn it on. Oh no, Sonny, that's just a fun editing trick someone decided to do.
When I was a kid, I had a book. In this book, a character moves to a new town. To do this, the family has the house lifted up and placed on the back of a truck and driven to an empty piece of land in the new town. I was convinced that this is what happened whenever anyone moved. What really got me was that other than this, the book was really plain and normal. See Jim Run type stuff. It wasn't some kind of fantasy book or anything. We moved from a decent house with no yard to a trailer with a nicely sized yard. I was confused but thought it was just taking a long time for our house to arrive. No, we just had to actually live in the trailer. Biracial babies. I thought they would come out swirled. I don't know if this is controversial to say, but that sounds cool. Why my parents, when together, ever needed privacy. I thought I was supposed to sprout a second penis to match my two balls. I don't know if anyone remembers the kids' voices that answered the questions that Steve asked on Blue's Clues. Well, I thought those were just other kids that were watching the show at the same time, like there was some kind of microphone on the TV that would pick up my voice, and other kids watching would hear. So I used to whisper dirty words into my TV real quiet with my hands cupped around my mouth so my mom wouldn't hear, but the other kids watching would. I thought the lyrics to Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap by AC/DC were Dirty Deeds and the Thunder Chief. You know what, I'm pretty sure that I also grossly misheard that song and thought it said something else as well. I overheard my mom and dad talking about having to fire someone. I thought it meant they were going to set him on fire. The fact that they were upset and serious about it added to the illusion. I thought I must have two stomachs, one for food and one for drinks. How else would the food know to come out one hole and the drinks out another? When I was 5 in 1996, I thought for some reason that 1997 was 1,000 years in the future. So one day, my parents were watching local news, and there was a story on a golf course that would be completed in 97. And my thought was, you idiots, we'll all be long dead by then. Why does a golf course matter? When I was a kid and my mom didn't want me to watch something on TV, she would tell me that it was a scary show or scary movie. Well, I somehow got it in my head that the 2001 Planet of the Apes film was the single most terrifying movie ever made. I didn't see it until I was about 11 or 12 and then understood my mom's parenting techniques. I mean, good lord, I would not want to have to live through the ape-human war. God, that'd be terrifying, horrible. Why women's bodies didn't return to the former state immediately after giving birth. I told my mom she was still fat as we were leaving the hospital after she had my sister. Damn, kid. Harsh. My boyfriend told me this. Backstory. He was raised by a single mom and had two siblings. So my boyfriend overheard a conversation with his mom and babysitter. Apparently, they had a mutual friend who had a few kids. His mom sarcastically says, if she shakes hands with a guy, she'll get pregnant. Being a child, my boyfriend was obviously horrified. It took his mom a long while to figure out why he wouldn't shake hands when meeting people. My cousin had a chore chart of different categories like bedroom, bathroom, etc. The last category was labeled miscellaneous, and I always thought she had a neighbor that she did chores for and her name was Miss Alanius. Childbirth. I thought my dad would be able to have babies. They still have a good chuckle every time they tell that story. Marriage. I thought you had to find someone with the same last name to get married. It didn't help my parents didn't correct me on it. More so because they have different last names and were common law married until it was abolished a few years ago. I figured my parents were rebels. It's not the weirdest assumption kids have made about what constitutes getting married or how you get married, I guess. Autism. I always thought autism was like a license to drive cars. Autoism. I believe that you had to get diagnosed with autism by a doctor so that you were fit to drive. Makes sense, right? On television, informative autism commercials would constantly air and there would be a test crash dummy impacting a car. I thought that if you didn't have autism, you wouldn't be able to drive and you would get into an accident and turn into a crash test dummy. It all made sense a few years ago. I still don't have my license. I was 17 when I learned my favorite animal, the jackalope, wasn't real. I totally get that. It is mundane enough, it is plausible enough that it's like, yeah, that could be real. I think I might have been around the same age or older. I was 50-50 for a while though. I remember saying to my friend, hey, a jackalope's real? And he even looked at me and was like,
I don't think they are they? And we both looked it up on the internet. And so, rabbit with antlers, it's plausible. I get it. I have a couple that I have my parents to blame for. They made me think that you can unlock the car by voice command and always got me to shout, "Unlock," as they would unlock it with their remote. Sadly, this went on for much longer than it should have. Second, when I would be at my mom's work, she would tell me to cover my eyes completely with my hands while she made photocopies of any documents because she said I would go blind. I think I was between 5 and 8 years old. They make fun of me from time to time, but I apparently had no reason to not trust my parents. Back when I was a little one, about 4 or 6 years old, I was forced to go to Sunday school. During our Sunday school sessions, we would all sit around a large lady talking about Jesus and all of his crazy antics. I wasn't much for listening, but knew I should probably get some key facts in case I am asked what I learnt in Sunday school. This particular session, we were learning about Adam and Eve. To summarize the tale, there is an apple which caused bad things to happen when you eat it, and 2 naked people. Anyway, fast forward to the next weekend where our family is hosting a family get-together. South American families have a lot of relatives. As my mother is showing people around our yard, she plucks out an apple. I smack it out of her hand and proceed to explain why she couldn't eat the apple. I had gotten the notion that somehow Adam and Eve became naked by eating the apple, and there was no way in hell I wanted to see my mother naked. Anyway, to this day, I can't eat apples in peace around my family without some sort of wisecrack. You should have paid better attention. It kind of reminds me, though, of how one time me and my friend got through a class where we were learning about the book Great Expectations, where we didn't actually read the book, but instead we referenced the episode of South Park where they did Great Expectations by subtracting and deducing what was too crude to be legitimate for the original work, and we actually got through the class really well. My dad was such a terrible highway driver that when we went on our annual vacation, he inevitably got into a car accident, usually a minor fender bender. I thought that every trip needed to include an accident and would pester him while on the road. When's the accident going to happen? When's it going to happen? What is wrong with you? I'm just picturing like the insurance agent, the police, every year on that day, on that annual trip, it's like, well, it's going to happen inevitably. This guy's going to call up or whatever, or someone's going to call up about them, and the police are like, he's coming. I know he is. He's never let me down. Thought drinking and driving referred to any type of beverage, so when my uncle took a Coke for the road, I was shocked. I'd always heard that you could only survive a couple days without drinking water. Well, I stayed with my southern grandparents for likely 2 weeks. During that time, I drank nothing but iced tea. I was really worried I was going to die soon. I thought Albert Einstein created and gave life to a monster called Frank Einstein, and that's why he was considered a genius. I thought when you moved somewhere, you had to find a person in that town who needed to move to your town and then swap homes with them. When people said, I'm serving so my kids don't have to, I assumed that meant your kids were forced into the military if you didn't do it? Kids are literal. That'd be a terrifying prospect for certain. I didn't realize John Lennon was a different person than Lenin, the Soviet premier, as the names are pronounced almost the same and both had a huge impact in the 20th century. The world made a lot more sense once that one got cleared up. Before I ever had the talk, I inferred that babies were in fact made when 2 people kiss and their germs mix. I wasn't that far off. I didn't understand that TV shows were recorded, so when I saw the actors jumping in age from young to old and vice versa in the span of a week, I thought it was some type of wizardry. I'm surprised I haven't seen one saying, I thought the cartoons were like in or behind the TV and I just had to like catch them when they were off guard or something. I was raised very Catholic. For some reason, I thought a person's torso was called their body, so when I learned that when people die, their bodies stayed on earth while the rest of them went to heaven, I thought upon death a person's head, arms, and legs flew off and went into the sky. I also thought people had funerals for torsos. It was pretty metal. What a charming mind you must have. I mean that legitimately, by the way. I thought for a very long, almost too long time that an only child was pronounced lonely child because they had no siblings. When I was in pre-K, I was walking down the hall to recess, just chilling out with one of my friends when I saw one of those handprints made out of paper with a student's name on it. You know, the ones you have all your kids make and then you put them on your door. Anyways, the name on this one was Jesus. Hey, Look, Jose, there's a kid named Jesus. It's Jesus. I've read my children's Bible 5 times. I think I know how to say Jesus. No, it's a Mexican name. You just say the J like H, like with my name. Jose does not have a J. I know how to spell my name, man. And I know how to spell Jesus. We fought about it for at least 5 minutes. I was not a fun kid. I thought everyone lived to the exact same age, like my brother taunted me for being 3 years younger than him, but in my mind it was no sweat because I was going to be alive for 3 more years after he died. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's also a thought that passed through my mind at one point or another. At least it sounds weirdly familiar to me. I misunderstood cardinal directions. I thought north was always in front of me. I misunderstood my family taking me to see the circus. I thought all the animals and people were there to see me. I misunderstood cashiers. I thought they had all that money and items. I misunderstood SX, despite learning about it from a book that was supposed to scientifically show it in the way kids understand. I thought a giant sperm climbs up the woman's leg as the couple holds hands. Certainly, if that were the way that it went, I don't think anyone would be interested in doing the deed. People just said, he died for your sins, over and never explained what that meant, as if it was obvious. It's not. But I wasn't born yet. He died for your sins. As punishment for my sins? Or he died for your sins? For me or for the sins? He died for your sins. So does that mean it's okay to sin? He died for your sins. So am I forgiven or he died for your sins? Please explain that phrase, Mom. Until Jesus died, sins could not be forgiven. Because of the ritual sacrifice, sins can now be forgiven. This may or may not apply to people who sinned before his death. Why didn't God just say, okay, I forgive sins now? Jesus died! Sorry! When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Linked in the description below.